Chapter 430. Miscellaneous Treasure Street was bustling with people. Most of the people who came here to search for treasures had the mentality of picking up scraps. The entire street was several kilometers long, but it was not a straight line, but an S-shaped, twisting and turning, with many branches extending out. The shops on both sides of the street were next to each other, and there were many stalls by the roadside. There were more than 100,000 registered shops and stalls. There were losses and profits in doing business. Those who could not maintain their business would naturally sell or rent the shop. Some posted information on the spirit net, while others left information on the billboards set up in Miscellaneous Treasure Street. Hundreds of shops were for sale every day, and even more were for rent. Li Daochong was not interested in renting. He only wanted to buy a shop with independent property rights, and it would be best if the area was bigger. After walking around for half a day and looking at more than 10 shops, Li Daochong did not take a fancy to any of them. It was either the area was too small or the geographical location was too prosperous. Li Daochong's main purpose was not to do business, but to have a stronghold, just like the old mansion back in Blue Bay Star. Doing business was just a convenience, to give old Ghost Zhang something to do. The sky was getting dark, but Miscellaneous Treasure Street was still very lively. Because of Princess Catherine, Li Daochong and the other two would attract a lot of attention wherever they went. Li Daochong felt that this was rather inconvenient. This woman was too beautiful, and it was troublesome. It was easy for her to attract trouble. With Li Daochong's current strength, he was not afraid of anyone looking for trouble. If there really was someone looking for death, Li Daochong did not mind sending him on his way. However, this was a waste of time, and Li Daochong's expression was not very good. Princess Catherine seemed to have noticed that Li Daochong's mood was not right. She consciously took out a low-grade robe and put it on, covering her body and face. Only then did the restless gazes disappear. The one who led Li Daochong to look at the houses was a young woman with a rather pretty appearance. She was immortal through and through. The young woman's name was Zhen Meili. She was a real estate agent in Miscellaneous Treasure Street. She was in charge of the business of shops and made a living by taking intermediary fees. At first, Zhen Meili was quite enthusiastic. During this period of time, the turnover of the shops on Miscellaneous Treasure Street was very low. It was almost the end of the month, and she hadn't opened for business this month. Just as he was worrying about how to continue living, he saw this young man come over with an old man and a beautiful woman, asking if there were any shops. Looking at the young man's clothes, there was nothing special about them. They were all cheap goods and did not even have a single Dharma robe. They did not look like rich people. However, there were many times when one couldn't judge a book by its cover. Zhen Meili had been in this line of work for 7 or 8 years and had seen all kinds of people. Those who could open shops in Miscellaneous Treasure Street were basically all cultivators or had the support of cultivators behind them. Mortals didn't have the ability to get their hands on magic treasures. The mortals here all made a living by working for cultivators or cultivation companies. Their status was very low. It was the same for Zhen Meili. The boss of the Shangyuan agency she worked for was a foundation establishment stage cultivator. If you didn't have some skills, you definitely wouldn't be able to survive in Miscellaneous Treasure Street. The starting price had to be at the foundation establishment stage. Otherwise, your peers would play with you until not even your bones were left. Therefore, when Zhen Meili saw Li Daochong's clothes, she did not look down on him. Instead, she secretly used the small magic treasure the boss gave her to secretly test this young man's cultivation level. As soon as she tested him, Zhen Meili was greatly disappointed. He was actually just a refinement stage little guy. However, Zhen Meili still maintained her enthusiasm because she noticed the other 2 people who came with the young man, an old man and a beautiful woman, a mere chi condensation cultivator. Accompanied by 2 people like this was very thought-provoking. Looking at the behavior of the old man and the beautiful woman, they were very respectful to the young man. The combination of an old butler and a maid was the most common follower of a rich family's young master. Zhen Meili's initial judgment was that the young man's family background must be good. She received him enthusiastically and introduced several shops with excellent geographical locations. But after looking at one shop after another, the young man still did not take a fancy to them. After looking at more than 10 shops, Jean Meily's legs were about to break. But this young man did not have the slightest intention of buying. This made Jean Meily a bit annoyed. "Brat, you didn't come here just to make fun of me, right?" The more Jean Meily thought about it, the more she felt that something was wrong. Recently, business was not good. In addition to some objective factors, the main reason was that a new intermediary opened in miscellaneous Treasure Street and took away all the business. It was said that the intermediary had an underworld background. Even the boss, who had always been strong, did not say a word and pretended that he did not see it. This new intermediary only opened for 3 months, but it had already squeezed out 5 other intermediaries. Jean Meily's Shangyuan intermediary continued to operate because the boss had some connections. But it was still very exaggerated to squeeze out 5 intermediaries in such a short period of time. Jean Meily did not understand at first. A few days ago, she heard that the new intermediary would use despicable means to squeeze out its peers. For example, it hired fake customers to fool other intermediaries, found gangsters to make trouble, and even hired powerful thugs to beat up the boss. The more Jean Meily thought about it, the more she felt that something was wrong. These 3 guys were not sent by the new intermediary to play with her, right? Seeing that the sky was getting dark, Jean Meily started to worry about her safety. So she sent a long-distance message to her boss. "No on you. I'm about to get off work. The client is still looking at the shop on the old street. Where are you?" She received a reply very quickly. "I'm nearby. Take them to see the shop that has been empty for 3 years. I'll be there right away." Seeing the message, Jean Meily's heart skipped a beat. "No on you. That shop is very strange. No matter who buys or rents it, they will definitely meet with an unexpected death within 3 months. The previous few landlords all died unnatural deaths. The security bureau came to investigate, but they didn't find anything. The few merchants next to the shop have all moved away. It's not very good to take the client to see the shop. The economy is bad now. I can't care so much. Didn't you say that the client is not a local?" "Indeed, he's not a local." "Then that's enough. Take them there. I'll be there right away." "Okay." After Jean Meily quickly sent the message to her boss, Lin Nuanyu, she brought Li Daochong and the other 2 to the side streets of miscellaneous Treasure Street. The number of people on this street immediately decreased. There were very few pedestrians on the street, and many of the shops on both sides had closed early. The shops that were open were very quiet, and very few people were interested in them. However, Li Daochong's eyes lit up. The environment here was quite ideal. Old Ghost Zhang had a bitter expression. He had high hopes for the few shops in front, and the flow of people was quite good. However, Li Daochong didn't like them. Old Ghost Zhang was just a follower, and he wasn't the one paying for them. Naturally, he didn't have the right to speak and could only continue to follow. After entering this street, Old Ghost Zhang had a look of disdain. Could a shop be open here? There was no one at this time. Wouldn't it be a ghost street during the day? Old Ghost Zhang really didn't expect that there would be such a place in a big city like North Star City. The feng shui here was too bad. The further they went into the middle of the street, the less people there were. Be it the pedestrians or the shops, they all seemed to be avoiding something. Old Ghost Zhang acutely sensed that something wasn't right. This street wasn't considered long, only a few hundred meters in length. Although it was quiet, there were still some people. However, these people were mainly concentrated in the front and back streets. The strange thing was that there wasn't a single person in the middle of the street. The shops on both sides of the street were tightly shut, and a few of them had advertising slogans pasted on their doors. Even the street lamps had turned dim. Old Ghost Zhang had mainly captured some low-level dark ghosts to sell over the years, so he was very sensitive to changes in the environment. When they got close to these few shops, Old Ghost Zhang clearly sensed a slight change in the temperature. Although it wasn't very obvious, he was sure that the temperature had dropped. Old Ghost Zhang took out a compass from his sleeve and took a look. The yin-yang needle on the compass didn't show any abnormal movements. "Strange," Old Ghost Zhang asked softly, feeling suspicious. Jean Meily brought Li Daochong and the other 2 to a shop in the middle of this street. There was a very eye-catching sign hanging on the door, with 16 large words written on it. Chapter 431. The atmosphere of this street was completely different from the outside. In fact, it was only a few hundred meters away, but the difference was like heaven and earth. Outside, there was a surging tide of people and flowers, but there was no one here. If they didn't know that this was a branch of miscellaneous Treasure Street and directly entered here, they would think that it was some corner. Li Daocheng's spiritual sense had already probed a few empty shops around, but he didn't find anything special, nor was there any death aura. He could confirm that there were no ghosts of the Hades here, but the strange thing was that the environment here seemed to be caused by some dirty things. Jeanne Meili suddenly shuddered, and her body couldn't help but tremble slightly. She didn't want to come to this damned place at all. As long as you stayed on miscellaneous Treasure Street for a while, no one was willing to come here. This street had been forgotten a few years ago and became a forbidden area of miscellaneous Treasure Street. Everyone called this place Curse Street. At first, they thought it was haunted, but the Security Bureau came to investigate and invited many cultivators from Jindan and Yuanying. But no matter how they investigated, they couldn't find any problems. But as long as they stayed here, they would definitely go insane and die within 3 months. At night, they would also hear the cries of women and children. Many cultivators from North Star City came here to explore, and some curious cultivators came together and lived next door. When they heard the cries of women and children at night, they immediately rushed in. Strangely, they didn't find anything. They turned the shop upside down, but there was nothing. There were also cultivators who set up mysterious ghost-catching spiritual formations, but they also found nothing. Even a military sent people to investigate. For 3 months, the troops were stationed here. They used all kinds of the most advanced detection magic weapons, and even used precious space magic weapons. Still, they didn't find anything. After 2 to 3 years of investigation, many people finally came to the conclusion that there were no ghosts of the Hades here. After the results came out, people thought that the sudden deaths of the previous landlords should just be a coincidence and had nothing to do with this shop. So, someone bought the shop, and it was a cultivator foundation establishment stage. As a result, this cultivator stayed for 3 months. On a moonless night, he went crazy while cultivating and died suddenly. His death was miserable, and his expression was ferocious. It was as if he had seen something extremely terrifying before he died, and his appearance showed obvious signs of aging. After that, a few more landlords moved in. Without exception, all of them died within 3 months, but the reasons for their deaths were different. There were also some who didn't die in the shop, some who were killed on the street, some who were killed by boulders that suddenly fell from mountains, and some who died on top of women's bellies. However, all of them had 2 things in common after they died. First, they had an expression of extreme fear, as if they had seen the most terrifying thing in their lives. The other was that they would show obvious signs of aging. Although they were not senile, they would be much older than before, and their hair would also turn white. No matter how hard they tried, no one was able to find out the cause of the fire in this shop. However, people continued to die suddenly. The only survivor was the last landlord of this shop, a late Jindan cultivator. Although he had survived, the Jindan cultivator had lost half his life. This Jindan cultivator's background wasn't small. He was the vice dean of the North Star University's cultivation department, Huang Ruo. In fact, the person who bought this shop wasn't Huang Ruo. Instead, it was the North Star University's cultivation department's research lab. Because of the strangeness of this shop, it attracted the interest of the North Star University's cultivation department's research lab. They wanted to research the cause of these strange occurrences. The research lab believed that there might be some kind of unknown psychokinesis field here. It was a field that current cultivation technology had yet to reach. If they could research it, it was very likely that the Shanghua Federation's cultivation technology would improve by leaps and bounds. But the vice dean, Huang Ruo, not long after she brought her team here, there wasn't much progress in the research, but strange occurrences kept happening. For example, their research equipment would move for no reason, but there was nothing on the spirit light surveillance. After that, everyone started having problems with their cultivation. Huang Ruo, once, she heard a woman crying. She went into the room where the sound came from. After entering, She didn't find anything. When she started cultivating the next day, she almost went crazy and even had hallucinations. The entire team hurriedly packed their bags in panic and left this damn place. This was the only time that no one had died after moving in. Huang Ruo, she only fully recovered after half a year of recuperation. Since then, the shop had been empty. 3 years had passed, and no one had cared about it. This place was known as the first of the 3 ghost places on planet North Star. The other 2 ghost places have been found out over the past few years. They were no longer ghost places. This place had become the only ghost place with unknown causes. The unexplainable strange occurrences made the surrounding merchants leave one after another. People called this place the Cursed Place. However, all the strange occurrences were limited to this shop. Although the neighboring shops were now empty, nothing strange had happened when people lived here before. Introducing such a strange shop to a customer, Jean Meili felt a little apprehensive. If they knew the history of this shop, it would be strange if they didn't beat her up. Jean Meili stood at the door of the shop and briefly introduced the shop to Li Daochong and the other 2, but she didn't bring them in. Jean Meili kept looking around throughout the process. There was some anxiety in her eyes. She wouldn't enter this shop, let alone bring anyone in. If something really happened, they would fight her to the death. This was a scam. Jean Meili just wanted to leave this place as soon as possible and let her boss, Lin Nuanyu, take over. Ms. Jean, don't just talk. Bring us in to take a look. Old Ghost Zhang was interested in the shop and urged, Master, please don't be impatient. I don't have the key. Later, our boss will personally show you around. Jean Meili was already prepared. She actually knew where the key was, but she would never bring anyone in. She didn't want to go in either. Li Daochong wasn't in a hurry. His divine senses had already scanned the shop. Other than sensing a very slight fluctuation of telekinesis, there was nothing wrong. After a while, a petite woman wearing a red robe walked over from the back street. When Jean Meili saw her, her expression softened. She immediately introduced her to Li Daochong and the other 2. That's our boss, Lin Nuanyu. Boss Lin will show you around the shop. It's time for me to get off work, so I'll take my leave first. As she spoke, Jean Meili greeted the woman in red and left in a hurry. Her footsteps were lighter as she walked, as if she was relieved. You Mr. Li, the one who wants to buy a shop? Lin Nuanyu asked. Yes. Li Daochong nodded. All right then, follow me in to take a look. If you think it's not bad, we can discuss the price. This shop is the largest among the dozens of resale shops I have. As Lin Nuanyu spoke, she waved her hand gently. A dusty step in front of the shop was lifted up, revealing a shiny silver key. Lin Nuanyu withdrew her hand, and the key flew into her hand. This move made Li Daochong's eyes light up. This woman's cultivation wasn't low, and her cultivation method was also top grade. The metropolis was a metropolis, after all. Any small boss of a real estate agency was a cultivator in the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage. In Blue Bay Star, they would be considered big shots. Here, however, they could only make a living at the bottom. When Lin Nuanyu used the key to open the door, her expression was clearly nervous. Her movements weren't very smooth, and she seemed to be hesitating. This detail naturally didn't escape Li Daochong's eyes, which had a hint of electricity in them. Old Ghost Zhang and concubine Sei also noticed Lin Nuanyu's actions. The 2 of them exchanged a glance, and a sense of wariness rose in their hearts. If it weren't for the fact that business wasn't doing well recently, and she couldn't pay off her loan, Lin Nuanyu wouldn't have brought people to look at this shop. But she didn't have many resources on hand. She said that she had the resources of dozens of shops, but it was a big exaggeration. Since last week, she only had the rights to transfer a dozen shops. The rest had been snatched away by the new real estate agency. Lin Nuanyu was able to cultivate to the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage, and all the expenses were earned by herself. But when she reached the foundation establishment stage, the expenses were too high. Even if Lin Nuanyu was very good at earning money, she couldn't afford to support herself. Last year, when she tried to break through to the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage, the amount of cultivation resources she needed increased sharply. Lin Nuanyu calculated the amount of money she had, and it was far from enough. But she was about to break through, and if she missed it, she might miss the best time to break through. The only way to raise such a large amount of money in a short period of time was to take a loan. Lin Nuanyu didn't want to miss the opportunity, so she went all out and took a loan of 1.5 million beginner spirit stones from the loan company. In addition to her savings of a few 100,000 beginner spirit stones, she finally bought the resources she needed and finally succeeded in breaking through. As an individual cultivator, reaching the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage at the age of 25 was already quite difficult if she wasn't extremely talented. Lin Nuanyu also earned quite a bit every month. Adding everything together, she earned tens of millions of Federation dollars a month, which was equivalent to tens of thousands of beginner spirit stones. Her repayment period was 10 years. She had to pay back 200,000 beginner spirit stones a year with interest. Although the pressure was great, she could still afford it. But in the past 2 to 3 months, because of the new real estate agency, Lin Nuanyu's monthly income had greatly decreased. She had already missed her repayment limit for 2 months. If she defaulted this month, it would be 3 months in a row. The loan company had already warned Lin Nuanyu that if she defaulted again, someone would come knocking on her door. Lin Nuanyu was in a difficult situation now. If not, she wouldn't have taken the risk of being cursed to bring people to look at this shop. Jinmei had already said that the real estate agency had looked at all the shops in her hands and wasn't satisfied with them. This was the last one. Jinmei also told Lin Nuanyu about her worries. She was worried that there were people sent by the new real estate agency to cause trouble. Lin Nuanyu thought that if they were here to cause trouble, they would definitely know about the glorious history of this shop. They wouldn't dare to enter even if they were given 100 guts. If they followed her in, she could be sure that they weren't here to cause trouble, but were real customers. It was just that they were new here and didn't know much about this shop. There was no harm in trying to promote it. Lin Nuanyu didn't want to miss any opportunity to make money. Although the price of this shop wasn't high, the commission was very high. She could get 40% of the commission. Lin Nuanyu's slight hesitation was noticed by Li Daochong and the other two. They looked at each other and followed her into the shop. After entering, Lin Nuanyu turned on the lights. As expected, the walls weren't covered in dust. Instead, it was very clean. Li Daochong and the other two didn't feel much, but Lin Nuanyu's hair stood on end. No one had entered this shop for 3 years. After the researchers from North Star University left, it had been empty. No one had entered for 3 years. The interior walls were brand new and spotless. The counters, tables, and chairs looked like they were used every day. There wasn't a speck of dust. Chapter 432. If Lin Nuanyu was just an ordinary girl, she would have collapsed to the ground after seeing the scene in the shop. She might even have fainted. Fortunately, she wasn't. Although she felt a chill down her spine, she didn't expose herself because of her deep cultivation. Princess Catherine looked at the tables and chairs with shining eyes and sent a message to Li Daochong silently. Master, the tables and chairs here are all made from 1,000-year-old sapphire rosewood. A single chair is worth at least 100,000 elementary spirit stones. Sapphire rosewood is one of the best raw materials for high-grade talisman paper. Hearing the message, Li Daochong's eyes moved. He didn't know much about spirit wood. If it wasn't for Princess Catherine, he wouldn't have known that these tables and chairs were so valuable and could be used to make high-level talisman paper. Li Daochong was tempted. After settling down, the first thing he wanted to do was to make level 12 talismans. The shop had 2 rooms, one inside and one outside. After entering, there was a large courtyard that was more than 300 square meters. There were flowers and trees, a small bridge overflowing water, and a unique pavilion in the middle. There were houses on all sides of the courtyard. It was like a large courtyard house. The size of each house was not small. The exterior was antique, but the interior was more modern. It had everything that should be there. Mr. Li, this place is not bad. It's a bit out of the way, but the spiritual qi here is gloomy with a bit of cold qi. At first, I thought it was a faint death qi, but when I came in, I realized it was cold Yin's spiritual qi. Old Ghost Zhang transmitted his voice. Li Daochong nodded slightly. He also realized this. This place felt like the exit of some special spirit mine. However, Li Daochong didn't find any spirit mine fluctuations even after probing thousands of meters underground. Other than the hints from Princess Catherine and Old Man Zhang, Li Daochong also discovered something. The soil in the courtyard was a rare spirit soil that could be used to grow spirit herbs. Lin Nuanyu opened the door to a room at the back of the courtyard and said hurriedly, before Li Daochong and the other two could see what was going on inside. Lin Nuanyu was about to close the door and bring Li Daochong to the next room. At first, Li Daochong did not pay much attention to it. However, a vortex suddenly appeared in the depths of his sea of consciousness. It was as if the blood-boiling upgrader had been activated. Beep. Demon King's lingering thoughts detected. Li Daochong was shocked. Demon King? Hades were divided into 3 types. The first type was the most commonly seen dark ghosts. Most of them existed in the form of ghosts, which were the ghosts that often appeared among the common folk. They were also called specters. The second type had flesh and blood and possessed the dark body. Their numbers were greatly reduced, but they were much more powerful than the dark ghosts. They were the nobles of the Hades, and even the weakest among them was as strong as an early-stage Yuanian cultivator. The more powerful ones were even stronger than soul formation cultivators. The third type was the royal family of the Hades. They were the true ruling class of the Hades. It could be said that all the movements and actions of the Hades were under their control. They were the gods of the Hades. To be more precise, the Hades were gods that did not exist. They were demons that stood on the opposite side of the gods. Humans usually called them devils, demons, or evil spirits. Devils were the ultimate product of the Hades. In ancient times, they were called Yama Demon Kings, or Yama Kings for short. They had a devil body and could transform into anything. The weakest devil was comparable to a void refinement cultivator, who was above the soul formation cultivator. Demon Kings were even more terrifying beings. They were even more powerful than the combination of mortal lords and could compete with tribulation transcendence immortals. The Demon King level was something that Li Daochong could not imagine. It was the highest being in the Hades. It was like the tribulation transcendence immortals among the cultivators. They had reached the peak of this world. They could crush stars into powder with a single thought. How terrifying was that? The moment the hot-blooded upgrader sounded, the spirit chi in Li Daochong's body surged, and he almost went berserk. His hair stood on end, as if he was facing a great enemy. Even if it was just the lingering thoughts of the Demon King, it was enough to wipe out everything below Yuaniing. The lingering thoughts have been left behind for more than 10,000 years. There are no longer any spiritual imprints. It is only a magnetic field that exists in the flow of time. The notification sounded again. Li Daochong's stiff body finally relaxed. If it were not for the notification, he would have rushed into the room and used the Eye of Thunder punishment to destroy the lingering thoughts. In fact, Li Daochong did not sense any abnormalities. The lingering thoughts of the Demon King were far beyond Li Daochong's current ability. Even a soul formation cultivator would not be able to sense any abnormalities, let alone Li Daochong. Even if the Shenghua Federation used the power of the country, it would be futile. It was impossible to sense the lingering thoughts that had merged into the flow of time without the strength of a divine sense at the unification stage. This was also the reason why so many strange things had happened here so many years ago, and why they could not find a reason even after using so much power. Of course, Li Daochong was not clear about the past of this shop. The reason Li Daochong was able to discover it was all thanks to the hot-blooded upgrader. Li Daochong's emotions gradually calmed down. Although this lingering thoughts was strong, it did not seem to be aggressive at the moment. It only existed naturally in the flow of time in this space. Li Daochong's emotional fluctuations were not noticed by others, but his slight pause still made Lin Wanyuan's heart tighten. Lin Nuanyu did not see any clues. She was just worried that this young man with a low cultivation level would not like this place. How much does it cost to buy this shop? Just as Lin Yuan was feeling nervous, Li Daocheng's calm voice rang out. Lin Yuan's eyes lit up, and she quickly said, Mr. Li, this shop has an elegant environment, and it's huge. It's a rare place to stay in a busy city. The price is also very fair. The announced price is 15 million beginner spirit stones. If you can pay in one go, you could get a 20% discount. It'll be 12 million beginner spirit stones. When Lin Yuan reported the price, Princess Catherine and Old Man Zhang were still secretly shocked. 12 million beginner spirit stones was a huge sum for anyone below Jindan. Although this price was very generous, and could even be said to be cheap based on the terrain, size, and decorations in the shop, it was still a huge number for Princess Catherine and Old Man Zhang. It was like an entire courtyard house in Beijing's 2nd and 3rd Ring Road that was worth hundreds of millions and had a complete set of mahogany furniture. If it was sold for 12 million, would you want it? After Lin Yuan finished speaking, she tried her best to control her emotions. She nervously looked at Li Daocheng's lips. I want the shop. I'll pay in one go. However, I'll complete the transfer procedures today. Li Daocheng immediately said. Lin Yuan was stunned for a moment. She looked at Li Daocheng in a daze. She didn't expect him to be so straightforward. 12 million beginner spirit stones was a huge sum. Lin Yuan found it hard to imagine that this ordinary-looking young man in front of her would be able to take out such a huge sum in one go. What's wrong? Is it inconvenient? Li Daocheng saw that Lin Yuan didn't say anything, so he frowned and asked. No, it's convenient. Of course it's convenient. Our New Moon Intermediary's motto is to do everything possible to satisfy our customers' needs. Our customers don't have to worry, rest assured, and be at ease. Lin Yuan hurriedly said. She reflexively said all the slogans that she usually used. She couldn't care less now. Li Daocheng had 300,000 medium-grade spirit stones on him. One medium-grade spirit stone could be exchanged for 100 beginner spirit stones. 12 million beginner spirit stones was equivalent to 120,000 medium-grade spirit stones. Li Daocheng directly transferred the 120,000 medium-grade spirit stones into a palm-sized storage bag and handed it to Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan took the storage bag and checked it with her psychic power. She gasped. This guy actually paid with medium-grade spirit stones. In terms of actual value, 120,000 medium-grade spirit stones was more than 12 million beginner spirit stones. Good heavens! She couldn't tell that this guy was a tycoon. Lin Yuan tightly held onto the storage bag with 120,000 medium-grade spirit stones, unwilling to let go. Once the transaction was completed, 40% of it would be her commission. Lin Yuan had worked as an intermediary for so many years in miscellaneous Treasure Street, but she had never received such a high commission. Normally, when a shop was sold, the commission would only be about 3% to 4% and no more than 7% to 8%. If this shop could give 40% commission, it really couldn't be sold. Lin Yuan immediately said, Mr. Li, please wait a moment. I'll contact the landlord right away. Lin Yuan immediately turned and ran to the side to talk to Huang Ruo. She contacted Huang Ruo. While waiting for the call to connect, Lin Yuan was burning with anxiety. She was afraid that Huang Ruo was too busy to receive this telepathic message. A few seconds later, when Huang Ruo's voice sounded, Lin Yuan felt relieved. Someone wants to buy that shop? Are you sure? Huang Ruo exclaimed after hearing the news. Lin Yuan's mind buzzed, and she felt dizzy. Huang Ruo? Huang Ruo was a late-stage Jindan cultivator and a psychic cultivator. There was a strong vibration in his voice. Professor Huang, it's absolutely true. He gave me the money. The other party only has one request, and that is to transfer the ownership today. If it's not possible, he won't buy it. Lin Yuan didn't care about her dizziness and exaggerated. The other party was silent. A few seconds later, Huang Ruo's voice sounded again. Okay, I'll be right there. Then, Lin Yuan brought Li Daocheng and the other two out of the shop. When they returned to New Moon Intermediary, Lin Nuanyu served them tea and peeled spirit fruits. She was very enthusiastic about Li Daochong and the other two. About 20 minutes later, a woman in a yellow robe entered New Moon Intermediary. Naturally, it was Huang Ruo. Yes. When she saw that the buyer of the shop was a young man who looked to be at most 20 years old, she was really shocked. The transfer process wasn't complicated. As long as the buyer and seller entered the spiritual internet to change the owner's identity, the wristwatch would automatically generate a property spirit card. After the original spirit card was approved by the original owner, it would be canceled. In less than 10 minutes, the transfer was completed. The owner of the shop was officially Li Daochong. After everything was done, Li Daochong and the other two left New Moon Intermediary and went straight to the shop. Looking at Li Daochong's back, Huang Ruo felt a little guilty. She felt a little guilty. Originally, she wanted to tell the buyer about the shop. But Huang Ruo, her curiosity about the shop got the better of her, and she didn't dare to live there anymore. Huang Ruo. As an associate professor in the field of psychology, he was obsessed with academic research. She wasn't willing to give up any opportunity to do research. 3 years had passed, but she had never forgotten about that strange shop. She originally thought that the shop would be abandoned forever. She didn't expect that it would be sold and that someone would want to live there. A ready-made lab rat was sent to her door. It would be a pity if she didn't seize the opportunity to study it. Chapter 433. Li Daochong took Princess Catherine and old Ghost Zhang back to the shop. The furnishings here were neat and tidy. There was no need to clean it up. It was the kind of place where one could check in with their bags. After entering the shop, Li Daochong didn't say anything. He went straight to the room where he found the Demon King's lingering thoughts. Princess Catherine and old Ghost Zhang also knew Li Daochong's temper, so they didn't disturb him. They each found a room to stay in for the time being. The night passed quickly. The next day, old Ghost Zhang went out early in the morning. He estimated that he would stay here for a while. He wanted to familiarize himself with the environment first and see if there were any good things on miscellaneous Treasure Street for him to pick up. Princess Catherine wasn't as leisurely as old Ghost Zhang. Last night, she heard strange noises coming from the room next door. She went to check several times, but nothing happened. Princess Catherine simply stayed next door. She wanted to see what the hell was up to. As a result, when she went to the room next door, there was no sound here. Strange noises began to come from the room she used to live in. From time to time, she could hear a woman crying. Princess Catherine was a demon and a snake demon. She was vicious and ruthless. She wasn't afraid of ghosts and strange things at all. But she couldn't find a reason, which drove her crazy. She couldn't enter a meditative state all night. She was very annoyed. At dawn, Princess Catherine wanted to find Li Daochong to tell him about the strange things that happened last night. When she came to Li Daochong's room, there was no sound from inside. Princess Catherine didn't dare to disturb Li Daochong, so she directly found Ardwolf and Zhu, the two gangsters who were scared out of their wits yesterday, through the soul imprint. Princess Catherine had no power to resist in front of Li Daochong, but in front of mortals, she was a Foundation establishment great demon after all. Ardwolf and Zhu, the two gangsters, didn't sleep well last night. They were so scared that half of their souls had left them. They didn't dare to escape. How could they be afraid of someone who could kill Copper Scorpion and Silver Scorpion face to face? Moreover, they had taken the poison. Without the antidote, they would die. Fear and a sliver of desire for survival made these two usually arrogant and despotic hoodlums spend the night in fear. It was destined that he wouldn't be able to sleep that night. The fact that he wasn't scared to death already showed that the two of them were quite courageous. The next morning, Ardwolf and Zhu heard the voice of the terrifying Lamia in their heads. There was no one around, but they could hear the sound. To mortals, it was truly terrifying. Fortunately, the two of them had come into contact with cultivators before, so they knew how powerful cultivators were. Taking things from a distance, flying in the sky, and burrowing into the ground were not a problem for them. The Snake Lady only said one sentence and told them to come to shop number 18 on Red Crown Crane Street. The two of them naturally did not dare to disobey. Even though they were scared to death, they still forced themselves to drive a flying shuttle to shop number 18 on Red Crown Crane Street. Princess Catherine had originally planned to look for these two unlucky fellows in a few days, but last night's incident was a little strange. Recalling some of Lin Wan's actions yesterday, Princess Catherine felt that there was something wrong with this shop. She had to ask the locals. The most suitable targets were naturally the two hooligans who had been restrained yesterday. When Ardwolf and Urju saw the enchanting snake lady again, they no longer had any lust for her. They didn't even dare to look her in the eye. The two of them cried bitterly in their hearts. How could they have been so blind to find this demoness yesterday? With a single thought, the insufferably arrogant Scorpion gang was almost wiped out. "Are you locals?" Princess Catherine asked in a cold tone. "Why, yes." Ardwolf stuttered as he replied, his eyes wandering around. He didn't know what this demoness meant by asking this. "Were you born and raised here?" Princess Catherine continued to ask. In reply to Exalted Immortal, "The two of us were born in North Star City," Urju replied. Princess Catherine nodded. "Don't look like you've seen a ghost. I'm not going to eat you. Sit." Ardwolf and Urju looked at each other. They were given a seat, but they still didn't dare to sit. "If I ask you to sit, then sit. If you don't, then I'll break your dog legs," Princess Catherine said sternly with a frown. Slap, slap. Ardwolf and Urju were like birds startled by the twang of a bow. They found the nearest chair and sat down. Because they were too anxious, their butts almost hit the surface of the chair, making two crisp sounds. "Do you know why this red-crowned Crane Street in the downtown area of Miscellaneous Treasure Street is so deserted?" Princess Catherine took a sip of the Qingyun tea that she had brewed early in the morning and asked leisurely. Ardwolf and Urju were stunned. The two frightened hooligans revealed a look that said, "Who am I? Where am I?" Their expressions, because they were too frightened, they didn't pay attention to anything else. They even ignored the prestige of Red Crown Crane Street when they came. Now that they were asked, they realized that the place they were at was called Red Crown Crane Street. They were already scared half to death. Realizing that they were at Red Crown Crane Street, Ardwolf and Urju broke out in cold sweat. They seemed to have thought of something. "May I ask, Fairy, what's the number of this shop?" Urju asked shakily. "Number 18. Princess Catherine looked at the two of them suspiciously. "Don't." Ardwolf and Urju sat on the ground at the same time. "Oh my God." Then the two of them let out a scream and scrambled to escape. They were more scared than if they had seen a ghost. How could Princess Catherine let the two of them leave? With a wave of her slender hand, the shop door automatically closed. Two ropes flew out from her cuffs and restrained the two who were so scared that they were like dogs with their tails between their legs. "Immortal, Immortal, please let us go. This shop number 18 is a famous haunted house. Everyone who comes and has to die." Urju wailed. Yes, yes, Immortal, let's go out and talk. Don't do it here. Please do us a favor and let us go." Ardwolf also wailed. "Shut up. If you wail again, believe it or not, I'll make you wish you were dead." A cold light flashed in Princess Catherine's eyes. With a shake of her cuffs, dozens of small snakes crawled out. In an instant, the two unlucky hooligans were surrounded by snakes. Fiery silver viper. The two hooligans immediately stopped talking. This snake was ranked first among the 5 great poisonous snakes in the Federation and was highly poisonous. In fact, among the 5 great poisonous snakes, the fiery silver viper's poison was the only one that didn't kill. The other 4 great poisonous snakes were more vicious than the other. The colorful pearl snake, ranked last, would die within 10 minutes after being bitten by it. The second-ranked Fong snake only needed a trace of venom to invade the human body, and the blood in the body would freeze within 10 seconds. The poisoned person would die in 1 or 2 minutes. The fiery silver viper's poison couldn't kill people. No matter how much one was poisoned, they wouldn't die. However, it was ranked first. The reason was very simple. After being poisoned by the fiery silver viper, life was worse than death. Moreover, after being poisoned for 2 or 3 seconds, the whole body would be in intense pain as if it was being burned. Then you wouldn't die, and there wouldn't be any abnormalities on your body, but it would hurt. It would hurt until you died. The cause of death wasn't poison, but pain. Generally, most people wouldn't be able to withstand the pain for 3 days and 3 nights. Some people would die from the pain after several weeks. When they died, their appearance was extremely terrifying. Even Foundation establishment cultivators couldn't withstand it. Only Gene Dan cultivators could rely on the power of Gene Dan to control and expel the poison. The fiery silver viper's name was even more terrifying than the ghost of the Hades. The antidote for the fiery silver viper was extremely rare. It was another kind of poison. It was the usnea venom that was secreted by Princess Catherine. The two hooligans really wanted to die. If you don't want to live a life worse than death, then tell me what you know. Once you're done, I'll let you go. Princess Catherine looked at the two with disgust. The fiend race was filled with experts, and fiend race women were even more so. Powerful men would stimulate their most primitive mating instincts, while weak and cowardly men would make them feel incomparable disgust and contempt. Seeing the two men scared to this extent, Princess Catherine really wanted to grab their hair and smash them against the wall. They were dignified men, yet they were scared to tears. They were almost scared to death. If they were really scared to death, Princess Catherine had already decided to castrate them, because they didn't deserve to be called men. The two hooligans finally managed to stabilize their emotions. They had no choice but to submit to Princess Catherine's tyrannical power. The two of them spoke one after another, telling her everything they knew. The more Princess Catherine listened, the more frightened she became. The more she listened, the colder she became. This branch of miscellaneous Treasure Street was called Red Crown Crane Street. It was said that a long, long time ago, there was an immortal who went through tribulation here. He rode a red crown crane and went through tribulation. In ancient times, planet Polaris was a cultivator's paradise. The spiritual energy here was abundant, and talented people came forth in large numbers. Tens of thousands of years had passed, but planet Polaris was still standing strong. Although it had experienced several ups and downs over the course of these tens of thousands of years, and at its worst, it was reduced to a 5th-class cultivation planet. But through the efforts of several generations of cultivators, it finally regained its former glory and became one of the top 2nd-class cultivation planets in the Shenghua Federation. Red Crown Crane Street existed in ancient times. It disappeared in the middle. 1,000 years ago, the ruins were discovered and a small town was rebuilt with this place as the center. The original center of miscellaneous Treasure Street was actually this Red Crown Crane Street. But with the development of North Star City, this place gradually lost its central position and became a branch street. 100 years ago, Red Crown Crane Street was still very prosperous. But for some unknown reason, it became a bit strange a few decades ago. Some of the ancient treasures and gadgets that the merchants had painstakingly obtained would inexplicably lose their spiritual energy. They would either become scrap iron, or their level would drop, and eventually become defective goods. At first, the merchants didn't care, but after a long time, there would eventually be people who had doubts. Some merchants began to move to other nearby places. Once they moved, the spiritual energy of the magic treasures would no longer disappear. Gradually, Red Crown Crane Street lost its popularity. What happened next was the glorious history of shop number 18. Chapter 434. After Princess Catherine learned about the entire history of shop number 18 from the two ruffians, she entered the spirit intranet to look up the relevant information. It was a little different from what the two of them had said, but the general meaning was the same. After Princess Catherine confirmed the information, other than fear, she was more furious. Recalling Lin Nuanyu's actions yesterday, she felt increasingly suspicious. Was this woman deliberately hiding the truth about shop number 18 in order to earn money and leading them into this pit of fire? Princess Catherine didn't go back on her words. After Ardwolf and Urju finished telling her everything, she let them go. As for the antidote, Princess Catherine told them to go back and wait for orders. She would give them the antidote within 5 days. When the two ruffians left, they were dejected and had nothing to live for. Now that they had entered shop number 18, it was hard to say if something strange would happen to them next. After the two of them left, Princess Catherine gave it some thought. She felt that this was a serious matter and that she had to inform Li Daocheng immediately. Princess Catherine then hurried to the room Li Daocheng was staying in. She took a deep breath and raised her hand to knock on the door, not caring if she would disturb Li Daocheng. Just as concubine Say raised her hand, the door of the room opened, and Li Daocheng walked out, looking a little tired. "Master, I have something important to do," Princess Catherine said, but she was interrupted by Li Daocheng halfway. "I heard everything. Master, should we go look for that Lin guy?" Princess Catherine asked with a hint of anger. "No need. This place is pretty good," Li Daocheng said calmly. Concubine Say was stunned. Her face was full of confusion. "Don't stay in the rooms at the back of the courtyard with old man Zhang. Stay in the rooms on the south side of the courtyard for the time being," Li Daocheng continued. "Master, are you going to investigate the reason for the strange things happening here? Even the Yuanying cultivators couldn't find a reason. There's something fishy about this place. You shouldn't take the risk." Princess Catherine seemed to have realized something and said worriedly, "You don't need to know what I'm planning to do. Your mission now is to speed up your cultivation and condense your Yao core. I need more usnea poison." Li Daocheng's face sank. Princess Catherine's heart trembled, and her delicate body trembled slightly. She knew that she had forgotten herself just now. "Yes, master. I plan to open a high-grade talisman store. Here are 80,000 mid-grade spirit stones. Take it as the startup capital and renovate the store. After that, get the business license and other things done. If you have any difficulties, go to the Heavenly Abode Mansion in the southern suburbs of North Star City and look for Tang Xian. Tell her that I told you to look for her. She will help you." Li Daocheng turned around and returned to the room after giving his instructions. Last night, Li Daocheng had been studying the lingering thoughts. The Demon King's lingering thoughts that had existed for 10,000 years. Even if it was already very weak, it still possessed extraordinary power. If he could absorb it, Li Daocheng believed that his cultivation would improve by leaps and bounds. However, the power of the lingering thoughts still exceeded Li Daocheng's expectations. Li Daocheng had been testing it for the first half of the night. After locking onto it, he prepared to devour it in one fell swoop. In the end, Li Daocheng had almost suffered backlash. That feeling was very similar to when Li Daocheng had taken a risk to absorb the Black Soul binding spirit to heal Amani when he had just woken up. The only difference was that Li Daocheng's soul had almost dissipated last night. The Demon King's lingering thoughts that had existed for 10,000 years were much stronger than Li Daocheng's. The first battle ended with Li Daocheng's defeat. However, Li Daocheng had not gained nothing. During the thrilling battle, he had comprehended a hint of the profound mysteries of the law of time. Although it was still very vague, he had already established a basic framework. As the Demon King's lingering thoughts gradually faded away, it actually gained a bit of self-awareness and became a life form in the form of a wolf field. It was colorless, formless, and incorporeal. It was even more ethereal than the nether ghost body. Although it could not be touched, it could at least be seen. A wolf field could not be touched or seen. It could not even be sensed. Only a divine will that was stronger than this wolf field could sense it. After the Demon King's lingering thoughts gained self-awareness, it naturally did not want to die. It continuously absorbed the essence of its surroundings and relied on its vague memories to grasp the mysteries of time. Then, it merged into the torrent of time and completely disappeared. 3 days later, Li Daocheng emerged from the room. His face was slightly pale, but he was in good spirits. After 3 days and 3 nights, Li Daocheng had finally sealed the terrifying Demon King's lingering thoughts in the space-time of this room. It would not come out to cause trouble for the next 3 months. Li Daocheng had also angered the Demon King's lingering thoughts because of this and was almost dragged into the torrent of time. However, Li Daochong relied on his powerful divine will to escape the entanglement of the Demon King's lingering thoughts and escaped unscathed. In these 3 days, Li Daochong's understanding of the law of time had improved a little. It was probably impossible to annihilate and absorb the Demon King's lingering thoughts in a short period of time. With Li Daochong's current cultivation and divine will strength, it was impossible to kill the Demon King's lingering thoughts. The hot-blooded upgrader was also helpless against the Demon King's lingering thoughts because of its level. Li Daochong's strongest killing move was to draw the Demon King's lingering thoughts into his sea of consciousness. Then, he would use the hot-blooded upgrader to kill it. Although it was very powerful, the risk also increased sharply. It would be best if he could kill it, but if he could not, he would be the one to die. Moreover, that way of dying was the dirtiest way possible. It was equivalent to being possessed. Li Daochong had used this method several times before. However, as he became stronger, he felt that this method was unreliable. Although he could not absorb the Demon King's lingering thoughts, Li Daochong was not in a hurry. As long as he sealed the lingering thoughts and prevented them from causing trouble, his goal would be achieved. For Li Daochong, 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. When he arrived at the shop's outer hall, it was completely different from 3 days ago. Concubine Sei was busy arranging the counter. The workers were all strong men of the demon clan. They were all strong and vigorous. There was nothing to say when they worked. When Princess Catherine saw Li Daochong appear, she immediately greeted him and whispered, "Master, is there something dirty in your room?" Li Daochong nodded calmly. Princess Catherine continued to ask nervously, "Master, have you found out what that thing is? Just do what you need to do. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask. If someone asks you if anything strange happened here, don't say anything." Li Daochong's tone was cold. Princess Catherine stuck out her little tongue and looked at Li Daochong pitifully. "Master, can you not be so fierce to me? My life and death are in your hands. I will never be disloyal to you. Are you satisfied with the style of the shop's decoration? It's up to you how to decorate it. Where did these Demon Clan workers come from?" Li Daochong asked simply, replying to Master, "Because the name of shop number 18 is too famous. As long as the workers hear that they're going to work here, they won't come even if they are beaten to death. No matter how much money is given, it's useless. The workers from other places are also unwilling. After thinking about it, I can only find some monster race workers through some of my previous connections in the Bloodblade gang. Most of the monster race are not afraid of strange things. The monster race is tough, so if you give them enough money, they won't care where they go. Where's old Ghost Zhang?" Li Daochong came out to look for old Ghost Zhang, but he was nowhere to be seen. Old Ghost Zhang went out to treasure hunting. These days, old Ghost Zhang picked up a lot of good things. He's so happy that he goes out for a walk every day. "Master, are you looking for him?" Princess Catherine spoke with the body language of a snake woman. In the eyes of others, it was very coquettish. Those Demon Clan workers would drool at a glance. They couldn't wait to pounce on this hot snake woman and press her under their bodies. In fact, Princess Catherine's current state wasn't intentional. She just wanted to be closer to Li Daochong. Even if they had a master-servant relationship, she didn't want to be so cold. Ever since Li Daochong killed the Blood Ape King, his image in Princess Catherine's mind had changed greatly. In the eyes of the Demon Clan, the strong were everything. The Demon Clan blood flowing in Princess Catherine's body even made her have some kind of feelings for Li Daochong. To be able to give birth to the next generation with the strong was the most primitive impulse in the genes of every Demon Clan woman. This was something that the Demon Clan woman couldn't control herself. To put it simply, Li Daochong's strength had attracted Princess Catherine. She couldn't wait to repay him with her body. If not for her incomparable respect and fear for Li Daochong, Princess Catherine would have wanted to drug this powerful young man and then do indescribable things. Therefore, when Princess Catherine faced Li Daochong, she would always subconsciously show the most charming and enchanting side of the snake woman. She hoped to attract Li Daochong, even if it was just a little bit of a good impression of her. But because the snake woman's figure was really hot, no matter which angle one looked at it, her curves were breathtaking. When he comes back, tell him to meet me in the back hall. Yes, master. Li Daochong nodded and turned to leave the outer hall. Princess Catherine pursed her lips, somewhat disappointed. Li Daochong didn't even look at her from beginning to end. Li Daochong passed through the courtyard and came to the back hall. He casually glanced at the display around him. With a wave of his hand, the tables and chairs moved on their own. A few seconds later, they were all placed in the positions that Li Daochong wanted. Then, Li Daochong took out a few spiritual computers and recording devices that had been in his storage ring for a long time. Li Daochong didn't want to waste even a second, so he began to try to make level 12 talismans. A level 10 talisman could pose a threat to Jin Dan cultivators. A level 11 talisman could instantly kill cultivators below the late stage of Jin Dan. And a level 12 talisman could pose a fatal threat to all Jin Dan cultivators. Even cultivators at the early stage of Yuanying wouldn't dare to face it head-on. In the battle with the Blood Knife Society, Li Daochong seemed to have crushed them like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood on the surface, but in reality, he had consumed a lot of energy. Song Ink was damaged and couldn't be used again. The talismans had been used up, and he had no more treasures on him. The feeling of having fewer trump cards was always unsettling. Li Daochong had to arm himself as soon as possible. The difficulty of making level 12 talismans had reached another level. The materials were extremely expensive, and every failure meant the consumption of millions of elementary spirit stones. Li Daochong had to be careful. However, Li Daochong had accumulated a lot of experience in making talismans, and he also had the memories of his previous life that others didn't have. In terms of success rate, he was very confident. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of Li Daochong tapping on the spiritual computer keyboard echoed in the hall. Every tap represented the input of a spiritual base code. The spiritual array chip operated intensely. Inside the spiritual computer, Yao, Jili, igniting Domu Jun, Suahuahua, Lu, Liugali, Rashli, Wanlai Jili, Penang Ung Jili, Eternal Forging, Xiao, Chong, 2, Jili Mei Jili. Before level 10, Li Daochong didn't feel anything wrong with his spiritual computer. Only now did he realize that these spiritual computers couldn't keep up with the pace. Bang! Just as Li Daochong was typing the spiritual base code faster and faster, the back of the spiritual computer exploded. The internal talisman chip couldn't handle the overload and burned. What the hell? Li Daochong's head was burning with anger. The spirit sequence that he had worked so hard to type was gone, just like that. Anyone would go crazy. Fortunately, Li Daochong had made a backup. He immediately took out the talisman disk that was used as a backup and inserted it into another spiritual computer. His operation was as fierce as a tiger. Bang! The second spiritual computer was destroyed. Li Daochong suppressed his anger and continued to fight on the third computer. After reaching the middle stage of Jin Dan, Li Daochong's hand speed couldn't be compared to before. His spiritual force was seamless, and he could input tens of thousands of spiritual base codes to form a spirit sequence in 1 minute. Chapter 435. Li Daochong had encountered many problems when crafting spirit talismans, but he had never encountered a problem where a spirit brain would explode due to overload. The 5 spirit brains in front of him had been purchased by Li Daochong at the Shadow Serene Square a year ago and had never been replaced. Although Li Daochong didn't have a deep understanding of spirit brains, it had been more than a year since he had awakened, so he knew the approximate level of spirit brains. The 5 spirit brains in his hands were produced by a local spirit brain company in Blue Bay Star, and their configuration wasn't bad, but it was limited to ordinary people. For cultivators, this type of spirit brain was the lowest level and had just started. The performance of a spirit brain mainly depended on the central rune chip. At present, the highest level rune chip was made up of 100 million nano-level rune chips and spirit arrays, which could perform 100 million calculations per second. There was only one cultivator company in the entire Federation that could produce this kind of spirit brain, and it couldn't be mass-produced. The annual production was only around 100 units. The price was even more shocking. 3,000 high-grade spirit stones could be bought for one. One high-grade spirit stone was equivalent to 100 mid-grade spirit stones, which was equivalent to 10,000 elementary spirit stones. 3,000 high-grade spirit stones were equivalent to 300,000 mid-grade spirit stones, or 30 million elementary spirit stones. Not to mention ordinary people, even ordinary cultivators couldn't afford it. Of course, battle-type cultivators didn't need such luxuriously configured spirit brains. Having 10 million nano-level rune chips was more than enough. High-grade spirit brains were the patent of spirit sequencers and spirit cultivators. The 5 spirit brains in Li Daocheng's hands were only pitiful 100,000 nano-level rune chips, which were pitifully shabby. Every time a spirit talisman was upgraded, the complexity of the required spirit sequence would increase by several times. A level 12 spirit talisman needed to perform tens of thousands of spirit energy law calculations per second to produce a spirit sequence before finally obtaining the most reasonable spirit sequence. If Li Daocheng were to input second by second, these 5 spirit brains would be able to handle it. But it would take a month to complete a level 12 spirit talisman's complete spirit sequence. The efficiency would be greatly reduced, and Li Daocheng didn't have that much time to waste. Li Daocheng had already deliberately slowed down by inputting thousands of spirit base codes per second. With his mid-stage Gene Dan cultivation, he could do it 5,000 times per second. This was already an astonishing speed. Even Daoist spirit talisman's input speed was only about 20,000 times per second. Of course, a spirit sequence master's strength did not depend on their cultivation. Other than their hand speed, the most important thing was their precise control over their psychokinesis. Hand speed was also one of the criteria, because a slow hand speed meant that one's potential was limited. The higher the level of the talisman, the more complex and numerous the spiritual base codes needed. A 12th level spirit talisman required at least 1,000 spirit sequences to create a complete spirit sequence. A single spirit sequence consisted of over 10,000 spirit base codes. If your hand speed was not fast enough, it would take a lot of time to create one. It might even take a few months. What was even worse was that he might not necessarily succeed. If he failed, he would have to start all over again. Li Daocheng's hand speed had already exceeded the average standard. Creating talismans below level 15 was basically a piece of cake. It was just that even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. Li Daocheng had no choice but to send a telepathic message to Princess Catherine, telling her to buy 2 million nanometer talisman chips. When Princess Catherine received the message, she immediately went out to buy them. She estimated that it would take at least 10 minutes to buy them back. If she was slow, it would take at least half an hour. During this time, a complete set of spirit sequences would be completed. Li Daocheng naturally did not want to wait, and continued to use the spiritual brain in his hand. Finally, before the 4th spiritual brain was destroyed, the spirit sequence was completed. Following that, Li Daocheng immediately connected to the recording device and started to create the talisman. This step did not require manual labor. The spiritual brain would automatically complete the entire process. He only needed to place the materials into the recording device according to the ratio. After Li Daocheng finished his preparations, he nervously looked at the talisman paper below the recording device. With a click, he pressed the confirm button. Stop. The recording device started to work. The process was not long. The recording pin below the recording device accurately drew the instructions from the spiritual brain on the talisman paper. A few minutes later, Li Daocheng's first 12th level fire talisman was completed. Li Daocheng had just taken the fire talisman from the base plate when the runes on it immediately dimmed. Soon, the entire talisman paper combusted and turned into ashes. The first talisman was a failure. Li Daocheng opened the backup of the spirit sequence and quickly found the problem. Constantly changing spiritual brains not only destroyed the rhythm, but also caused the spirit sequence to have unpredictable faults. Coupled with the fact that the spiritual brain was too outdated, even if there were no mistakes, the spirit sequence would fail due to the lack of standards. Li Daochong bitterly smiled. He had been too impatient. Failing was not a big deal, but it was a pity that the materials were wasted. Although the quantity was not much, it was still over 100 elementary spirit stones. About 10 minutes later, Princess Catherine finally appeared and brought back 2 million nanometer spiritual brains. The surface of these 2 spiritual brains was made of star spirit crystal. They were completely black and as smooth as jade. After opening them, each button was like an exquisite piece of art. There was no harm without comparison. At this time, Li Daochong looked at the 5 spiritual brains he had been using. Not to mention that they were old and outdated. They felt like they had been bought from a second-hand market. Princess Catherine put down the spiritual brain. Seeing that Li Daochong did not say anything, she consciously turned around and left. But when she went out, her eyes flashed with doubt. She was curious about Li Daochong's sudden need for spiritual brains. Princess Catherine had always thought that Li Daochong was a battle-type cultivator. She did not expect him to be able to use spiritual brains. How much ability did this young man have that he had yet to show? Li Daochong's image became more and more mysterious and attractive in Princess Catherine's heart. Women of the monster race have no resistance to powerful and mysterious men. The moment concubine Say leaves the back hall and closes the door, she catches a glimpse of Li Daochong typing on the keyboard attentively through the crack of the door. He looks so handsome. Princess Catherine's heartbeat sped up for no reason. A layer of red appeared on her face. Her rosy and attractive cherry mouth stretched out a snake-like tongue and quickly licked her lips. "Master, it's really tempting." Princess Catherine couldn't help but whisper to herself as she walked through the courtyard. Her beautiful face was suffused with the unique allure of a snake woman. If she were on the street right now, who knows how many young men would be captivated. Unfortunately, from the moment she met Li Daochong until now, he had not even looked at her properly. Not killing this beautiful snake woman with a single slash was already a mercy. While Princess Catherine was indulging in flights of fancy, Li Daochong had already completed a small part of the complete spirit order. Whether it was good or not, one would only know after using it. The million-level spiritual brain was indeed extraordinary. Li Daochong pushed his hand's speed to the limit. The spiritual brain was not pressured at all. In just a quarter of an hour, Li Daochong had finished writing the improved spirit order. Then, he began to create the second level, 12 spiritual talisman. Following the same pattern, he practiced again. A few minutes later, another fire talisman was completed. Li Daochong nervously and excitedly took out the fire talisman. The lines on the talisman paper were clear, and each line was surrounded by a faint fire spiritual energy. It emitted a certain temperature in the air, and these lines contained a shocking amount of energy. Once triggered, it would erupt with a huge destructive force that could destroy mountains and rivers. Li Daochong created a level 12 fire talisman. He added his understanding of programming from his previous life. As long as it was successful, it would be an enhanced version. Once this fire talisman was launched, it could blast Jin Dan cultivators or soul catcher ghosts into smithereens. Li Daochong immediately began to create the second talisman. A day passed, and Li Daochong created a total of 2 fire talismans and 2 ice talismans. The materials that he had spent more than 5 million elementary spirit stones on were all used up. Even though Li Daochong's cultivation had reached the middle stage of Jin Dan, the production of the level 12 spiritual talisman had exhausted him. The consumption of mental force was huge. It was not until nightfall that old Ghost Zhang leisurely returned to shop number 18 from the market. From his old face with a smug smile, one could know that today's trip was not in vain. It was certain that he had picked up a bargain. "Brotherly, why are you looking for this old man?" Old Devil Zhang knew that Li Daochong was looking for him, so he immediately came to the back hall. "Old Devil Zhang, I'll leave that Song Ink Saber to you. Tomorrow, I'll be going to North Star University to report. Are you coming with me or going alone?" Li Daochong asked bluntly. "Brotherly, this old man will go alone. That comrade of mine has a very strange temper. If he likes someone, he will help you refine for free. If he doesn't like someone, even if you give him a spirit mine, he won't help you. As for whether you are to his liking, how would this old man know? I'll use the excuse of visiting to check out that old man situation. I haven't seen him for many years, so I don't know if he will do me a favor, old Devil Zhang said honestly. Then I'll have to trouble you, old Devil Zhang. Li Daochong nodded. Of course. Brother Li, you cured this old man's internal injuries and forcibly pulled back this old man's remaining lifespan. This old man is unable to repay this kindness, so I'll help you do a favor. Refining a magic weapon is a small matter. If you don't dislike this old man will follow you in the future. I don't have any other skills, but this old man still has some skills in refining, old Devil Zhang said sincerely. Old Devil Zhang, you are a senior. This junior doesn't deserve such praise. Your cultivation has been rising recently. At first, this junior thought that you were only at the early stage of Jindan realm, but now it seems that you are far from this level. Li Daochong rarely complimented others, but this time, his admiration came from the bottom of his heart. I still can't compare to you, kid. With your cultivation speed, it won't be long before I have to call you a senior. Old Devil Zhang smiled bitterly. No matter what this junior's cultivation is, old Devil Zhang, you are still a senior. If it wasn't for your help, this junior's Tsang ink wouldn't exist, Li Daochong said frankly. Brother Li, it's fate for us to meet. Let's not talk too much. This time, this old man will definitely forge your saber into the Federation's #1 treasure saber. Old Devil Zhang patted his chest and said, just as this old man and young man were happily chatting in the back hall, in the shop opposite shop number 18, North Star University's cultivation department associate professor Huang Ruo, she was using the most advanced detection equipment to investigate this place. Strange, it's been 5 days. Why is there no reaction at all? 3 years ago, something strange happened on the first night I stayed here. Could it be that shop number 18 has returned to normal after 3 years? Huang Ruo, she had been monitoring the movements of the shop for the past few days. That night, Li Daochong entered a state of deep meditation and had a good night's rest. Early the next morning, Li Daochong took a public flying shuttle to North Star University. Standing in front of North Star University's magnificent entrance, Li Daochong's indifferent face revealed a trace of longing. This was the Federation's highest level of education. It had nurtured countless talents and made outstanding contributions to the Federation's resistance against the Hades. Countless North Star University's students and teachers had left behind glorious achievements on the front lines. Every North Star felt proud to be a member of North Star University. Li Daochong might not have a strong sense of belonging to North Star University. After all, he didn't grow up here. However, this didn't prevent him from having respect for this institution of higher learning. Creak. Just as Li Daochong stared at the 4 big words North Star University on the entrance and felt something in his heart, an ear-piercing breaking sound was heard. Looking towards the source of the sound, he saw a holy light grade flying shuttle breaking just a few meters away, knocking a little girl who was pushing a cart to the ground. Fortunately, the shuttle braked in time. When it came into contact with the little girl, there wasn't much impact. The little girl only fell down along with the cart and didn't cause any serious consequences. A young man's head popped out of the holy light grade flying shuttle and cursed in exasperation. Damn kid, don't look where you're going. Are you looking for death? The little girl covered her feet with tears in her eyes. She was scared out of her wits. Chapter 436. The young man was so angry that he angrily opened the door and got off the car. He walked around the flying shuttle to check if it was damaged. When he saw that the front of the car was scratched and a piece of paint was chipped off, the young man angrily turned around and pointed at Xiaoling River, who was sitting on ground. Stupid girl, do you know how much this car costs? Call your parents and remember to tell them to bring money. Xiaoling River endured the pain and stood up with difficulty. Although her eyes were hazy with tears, she stubbornly didn't cry. Big brother, tell me how much money you need. I'll compensate you. You'll compensate? Little girl, you're just a kid. Can you afford it? The young man said with contempt, "Is this enough?" Xiaoling River took out 2 spirit stones from her pocket. When the young man saw the spirit stones, he immediately recognized that they were mid-grade spirit stones. However, his eyes quickly moved, and he sized up Xiaoling River. 2 mid-grade spirit stones were equivalent to 200 low-grade spirit stones. When converted to Federation dollars, it was worth at least 200,000. However, the actual value could reach 300,000 to 400,000. A low-grade spirit stone, if bought with Federation dollars, would normally be worth 1,000 Federation dollars. If sold in the underground city, it could be sold for at least 1,500 to 2,000. There were many people who wanted it. Money was used by mortals. Cultivators used spirit stones. Money was just a string of numbers and waste paper. Cultivators only needed spirit stones because there were too many uses for them. They could be used for cultivation, spirit arrays, refining, spiritual brains, flying shuttles, and all kinds of household treasures. Spirit stones were the most important energy source in the Great Cultivation Era. They were equivalent to electricity or oil on Earth. In fact, they were much more important than electricity and oil. The Holy Light level flying shuttle driven by the young man was expensive and belonged to the category of luxury cars. Naturally, ordinary people couldn't afford to drive it. However, just scraping off a small piece of paint would cost tens of thousands of Federation dollars. 300,000 to 400,000 would be enough to paint one side. However, the young man saw that Xiaoling River was young and dressed simply. The small cart she was pushing was filled with decorative trinkets. Previously, the young man had also seen this homeless girl near North Star University. He could tell at a glance that she came from a poor background and couldn't even afford to go to school. She had to rely on herself to run a small business to make a living. There were quite a few children like this in North Star City. Their parents might have died, or they might have been left behind to live with their grandparents. Their parents had gone north to work. There were many mines to the north of the planet, and they were mined year-round. Workers were needed to operate the steel golems, and some of the smaller ores needed to be mined. Many poor mortals went there to work to support their families. The young man guessed that he did not know where this little girl got these 2 medial-grade spirit stones from. She did not even know what they were, let alone their value. "Little girl, look at how pitiful you are." "Fine, I admit that I'm unlucky. Take these 2 spirit stones as a lesson. In the future, watch where you walk and don't wander around. If you met someone with bad driving skills, you would have been killed just now. You're harming others and yourself." The young man put on a preaching posture and took the spirit stones in Xiaoling River's hand. Just as the young man stretched out his hand, a large hand grabbed his wrist like an iron clamp. The young man screamed in pain. "Ouch!" Li Daochong gently pushed the young man, causing him to fall to the ground. The young man was furious. "You dare push me? Do you know who I am?" Li Daochong looked down at the young man and said, "If you don't want to be beaten, get out of here." The young man felt as if his eardrums were about to burst and his head was buzzing. He wanted to say something more, but he swallowed it back down. The young man quickly got up and glared at Li Daochong. Then, with a look of resentment, he hurriedly entered the flying shuttle. The young man sat in the shuttle but did not leave. Instead, he closed the door, opened his watch, and dialed a string of numbers. The call was quickly connected. "Oh, where are you? Come to the school gate." "Someone hit me," the young man said angrily. "What? Someone dared to hit you? You don't want to live anymore? Wait here, I'm coming." A surprised voice came from the other side. "Bring a few more people over. Young Master Jiang, who in the entire North Star City doesn't know that your father is a member of the board of directors of North Star University? Who dares to hit you?" Hung asked curiously. "Don't talk nonsense. Quickly bring people over and help me get back my face. I'm in a hurry. I'm going to see Tang Xian later." "Ha. Young Master Jiang, aren't you chasing after Su Wanqing recently? How come a superstar Tang Xian doesn't want Su Wanqing anymore? Are you coming or not?" The young man called young Master Jiang said impatiently. Come. I'll be there soon. Ma Shifeng will come with me. Are the 2 of us enough?" "Ma Shifeng? Which North Star University is it?" "The Ma Shifeng who is ranked 109th on the Star Glory list and is already in the late stage of foundation establishment. Other than him, who else could it be? Okay, tell him that if he can teach the guy who hit me a lesson, I'll cover his cultivation resources for this month. Hee, young Master Jiang. Even if you don't cover it, Ma Shifeng will help you, because he came to me to introduce him to young Master Jiang. The Star Glory list will be held next month, and he wants to be ranked in the top 100. Well, I can't touch the top 50, and I don't dare to touch them. But I can still do something to the top 100. That's good. We're almost there. When young Master Jiang called for help, Li Daochong had already forgotten about him. He brought Xiaoling River to the roadside and patted the dust off the little girl's body. Are you okay? Li Daochong asked gently. Little brother, it's you? Xiaoling River said in surprise. It's me. Li Daochong smiled and patted Xiaoling River's little head. Little brother, hurry up and leave. Don't worry about me. The person who drove the flying shuttle is very powerful and knows a lot of powerful people. Those powerful immortal brothers and sisters in North Star University are all afraid of him. I've seen him bully people before. You pushed him to the ground just now, so he won't let it go, Xiaoling River said with a face full of worry. She even pushed Li Daochong, telling him to hurry up and leave. Although Xiaoling River had seen how powerful Li Daochong was, she couldn't clearly distinguish the strength of a cultivator. In her opinion, no matter how powerful her little brother was, could he be more powerful than those immortal brothers and sisters in North Star University? Xiaoling River grew up in North Star University. How could she not know how powerful North Star University was? Everyone knew that it was one of the 4 great universities in the Federation. In the eyes of mortals, the 4 great universities were places where immortals went to study. Every single one of them was a powerful immortal. Looking at Xiaoling River's frail body and helpless gaze, and the blood stains on her injured calf, she didn't care about herself at all. Instead, she was worried about Li Daochong's situation. Li Daochong's heart was filled with warmth. He squatted down and said with a smile, "It's okay. Little brother is powerful. No one can bully little brother." After saying that, Li Daochong lifted Xiaoling River's calf. A layer of spirit energy vortex appeared on his palm and covered the wound. Xiaoling River only felt that her cold calf was immediately wrapped up by a warm feeling. Then she felt a little itchy. But soon that slight itch disappeared. When the little brother moved his hand away, her injured calf was no longer bleeding. The wound had healed. Xiaoling River's small mouth was wide open. Her small face revealed an expression of disbelief. Little brother, are you also an immortal who goes to school here? Li Daochong put down Xiaoling River's calf and patted the little girl's head. I wasn't before, but I should be in the future. Little brother is so powerful. Xiaoling River wants to become an immortal like little brother in the future. Li Daochong nodded. Yes, you can definitely do it. Bang! The heavy sound of a car door closing interrupted the conversation between Li Daochong and Xiaoling River. Young Master Jiang, who had just retreated into the flying shuttle, came out with a cold expression. Li Daochong stood up. When his gaze moved away from Xiaoling River and looked at young Master Jiang, it immediately turned cold. You still haven't scrammed? The one who should scram is you. Young Master Jiang suddenly became unyielding. Young Master Jiang, is this the kid who hit you? A mocking voice sounded. 2 young people wearing the North Star University's cultivation department's robes walked over. The one who spoke was a burly guy with a somewhat sculpted appearance. Chapter 437. Big brother, let's go. Xiaoling River saw that the situation was not right, so she pushed Li Daochong away. How could her small body push Li Daochong away? As for Li Daochong, there was no change in his expression, but there was a flash of ruthlessness in his eyes. Brat, this is Beijing University. It's not a place for a despicable guy like you to come. Do you understand? Besides, you can provoke anyone. But why did you have to provoke young Master Jiang? Do you have eyes on the top of your head? Zhang Heng walked closer and continued to talk. With help, young Master Jiang's chest was a lot straighter than before. He looked at Li Daochong with disdain, and there was a sinister smile in his eyes. It was as if he was saying, "Kid, are you kidding me? Hee, you're still far from it. Now you know who I am. Yuan Shifeng did not speak, but the aura on his body was constantly changing. He was very sensible and stood in front of young Master Jiang, consciously protecting him. There were many students coming and going at the entrance of North Star University. At this time, many of them were looking at them curiously. In fact, when Xiaoling River was hit, it had already attracted attention, but when the students saw the conspicuous flying shuttle, they chose to remain silent. Even if they felt that it was unfair, they felt that it was not worthwhile to offend the eldest son of the school's board of directors for a stray girl that they did not know. Of course, there were also some students who were focused on their studies and did not care about what was happening around them. However, when Li Daocheng pushed young Master Jiang down, many students stopped, but they did not gather around. Who was that kid? He actually dared to challenge young Master Jiang. The Jiang family is one of the shareholders of North Star University. The Jiang family is not as simple as being a shareholder of North Star University. The Jiang family has a military background. I heard that they're a division commander with a military rank of senior colonel. I've never seen that guy before. He shouldn't be a student of North Star University. What do you mean he shouldn't be? This guy doesn't even have a decent Taoist robe. How could he be a student of our school? His aura is also pitifully weak. Is he in the Qi gathering state? Although young Master Jiang comes from a prominent family, he is a promiscuous man. His talent is not bad, but his private life is too debauched. When he was in his teens, he went to the black prison to look for women from different races. Later, he got sick and his spirit meridians were damaged. That's why he was only in the Qi refinement stage at the age of 25. If young Master Jiang wasn't from the Jiang family, who would give a damn about him? A student who knew the truth said with disdain. The surrounding students nodded. The last sentence was what everyone was thinking. This young Master Jiang relied on the fact that his father was a school board member and was used to acting like a tyrant in the school. Young Master Jiang naturally didn't dare to provoke powerful students. After all, this was North Star University. However, this was the largest university in the entire Federation, and it had the largest number of students. There were bound to be many people who were weak. This group of people became the target of young Master Jiang's search for a sense of self-existence. If he didn't show off his demeanor as a member of a wealthy family, he definitely wouldn't give up. You either have to be respectful to me, or I'll trample you under my feet. Otherwise, I won't let you off. Young Master Jiang was spoiled since he was young. His logic was very strange. However, other than being arrogant and despotic, this guy wasn't reckless. He definitely wouldn't provoke students that he shouldn't provoke. This was also the main reason why this guy had been acting like a tyrant in North Star University for all these years, but he had always lived in peace. He could be considered a young master who knew how to adapt to circumstances. In fact, this young Master Jiang wouldn't usually bully a student to find a sense of existence. He wasn't that bored. However, when he found out that the superstar Tang Xian was coming to North Star University, he was still in Nanyue City. It was quite a distance away from North Star City, so he rushed all the way here. After driving the flying shuttle for 4 to 5 hours, young Master Jiang's heart was filled with impatience. However, the long journey was also very tiring. When he arrived at the school gate, he felt a little dizzy and almost bumped into Xiaoling River. In the end, when Xiaoling River took out 2 mid-grade spirit stones, this young master became greedy. It wasn't that he didn't have money. Naturally, he had money. However, mid-grade spirit stones were high-grade goods. They couldn't be bought with money. Because young Master Jiang's cultivation was low, he didn't have access to spirit stones at all. His family also didn't give him spirit stones. The meaning was very clear. Even if they gave him spirit stones, he wouldn't need it. Why would they give it to him? Therefore, even though young Master Jiang's family was prominent, he didn't have much access to spirit stones. Normally, he didn't need them. Being infected with a virus and destroying his spirit meridians was the greatest pain in young Master Jiang's life. Fortunately, his family was well off, so he didn't have to worry about not being able to find a wife. Young Master Jiang's biggest wish in life was to find 2 or 3 fairies who were as beautiful as fairies and had high cultivation as his wives. Right now, he had his eyes on 2 of them. One was Tang Xian, and the other was Su Wanqing, who was currently at North Star University, and even the entire Federation. Tang Xian was a popular celebrity. She had filmed several historical films about the Federation's resistance against the Hades. The most recent film, Goddess of War, was even more popular in the Federation. It even caused quite a stir in the three great cultivation empires. This film was adapted from a true historical event. It told the story of a Yuanning female cultivator from the Federation 500 years ago who bravely fought against the invasion of the Hades. Su Wanqing was a monster who was ranked in the top 3 of North Star University's Star Glory list. She had shone brightly in the recently concluded Central Star Region's 100 School Alliance exam and obtained second place. At the age of 21, she had reached the peak of Jindan. She was considered a peerless genius in the Federation. There were no more than 10 monsters like Su Wanqing in the entire Federation. In fact, young Master Zhang's ability was far from enough to get his hands on these two. His family background barely qualified, but his own strength was a little too shabby. However, young Master Jiang and Su Wanqing had known each other since they were young. Therefore, even though the gap between the two of them was huge, they were still childhood sweethearts. The Jiang family and the Su family had a close relationship. This was also the reason why he hadn't been beaten black and blue by Su Wanqing. As for Tang Xian, young Master Jiang had met her a few times when she was still studying at North Star University, so they could be considered acquaintances. This time, Tang Xian came to give a speech at North Star University. Young Master Jiang wanted to take this opportunity to develop his relationship with her. Of course, this was just his own wishful thinking. A toad that didn't want to eat a swan wasn't a good toad. Brat, if you kneel down and kowtow to me and apologize, I can pretend that nothing happened today. Otherwise, young Master Jiang looked at Li Daocheng fiercely and said, it was too embarrassing to be pushed to the ground in front of North Star University. If he couldn't get back his face, he wouldn't be able to show his face in North Star University anymore. In any case, he was still studying at North Star University's Soul Sound Department. Bang! As soon as young Master Jiang's voice fell, Li Daocheng kicked him. With a muffled sound, young Master Jiang rolled far away like a rubber ball. His nose was bruised and his face was swollen. Ma Shifeng, who was standing in front of young Master Jiang, didn't even have time to react before the master he was trying to protect was kicked away. This scene instantly caused an uproar among the surrounding students. Everyone was stunned. Where did this idiot come from? He actually kicked young Master Jiang in public. Wasn't he obviously slapping young Master Jiang's father's face? Even if young Master Jiang was in the wrong earlier, he didn't do anything extreme. Yet, you went straight to the point. It's not your fault that you made the first move. In fact, it's your fault. With the Jiang clan's capabilities, killing you would be a piece of cake. Young Master Jiang was standing right next to him, but he was still kicked. Ma Shifeng felt a little embarrassed. Ma Shifeng didn't see the wild brat's movements clearly. He didn't think that the latter was that powerful. It was just that he was too careless. Ma Shifeng didn't think that the wild brat would dare to attack again. His carelessness caused young Master Jiang to be kicked away. Wild brat, you dare to attack people in front of North Star University. You really have guts. Do you think that you are invincible just because you have some skills? You could be arrogant. How can a wild brat like you behave in the holy land of cultivation? Ma Shifeng was furious. As he spoke, spiritual energy surged from his body. He raised his fist and was about to punch. What's going on? A clear and cold voice came from behind. Ma Shifeng heard the voice and his body trembled. The voice was so intimidating that he almost lost control and hurt himself. Zhang Heng sucked in a breath of cold air. He also recognized the owner of the voice. Young Master Jiang stood up from the ground with his face covered in dirt. He endured the pain and wiped his face. He whispered, Wanqing. A graceful woman wearing a plain white robe walked out of the school. All eyes naturally focused on her. This woman was North Star University's proud daughter, Su Wanqing, who was known as the Pure Heart Fairy. She was going to the school's reception to prepare. Today was the day that the cultivation department's specially recruited students would report. As the president of the student council, Su Wanqing naturally had to welcome the new students. The reception was not far from the west side of the school gate. When Su Wanqing passed by the school gate, she saw young Master Jiang's car. At the same time, she saw young Master Jiang and two other people surrounding a young man and a little girl. Based on Su Wanqing's understanding of young Master Jiang, this guy was most likely bullying people again. Today, the specially recruited students would report in one after another. If the new students saw something like this happening in front of North Star University, it would have a bad impact. Su Wanqing walked forward and asked with a cold face. Su Wanqing saw the scene where young Master Jiang was kicked away. Although she did not have a good impression of young Master Jiang, they grew up together. Moreover, young Master Jiang didn't do anything extreme during Su Wanqing's observation. Su Wanqing then noticed the young man who was surrounded. His face was unfamiliar, so he should not be a student of North Star University. Wanqing, this kid, did not distinguish between right and wrong. He just hit people, young Master Jiang said hurriedly. His face was full of fear, afraid that he would leave a bad impression on Su Wanqing. Nonsense. You were the one who knocked me down first. Xiaolingxi yelled before young Master Jiang could finish his sentence. Xiaoling River hated being wronged. Lingxi, don't say anything more. Let's go. Big Brother will take you to North Star University. Li Daochong held Xiaoling River's small hand, completely ignoring young Master Jiang, Su Wanqing, and walked into the school. Stop! Who said you could leave? The matter is not settled yet. And you want to leave? Ma Jinfeng shouted and reached out to grab Li Daochong's shoulder. Before Ma Jinfeng's hand could fall, Li Daochong kicked sideways. Bang! Ma Jinfeng flew backward like a kite with a broken string. The kick did not seem to be powerful, and Ma Jinfeng was not kicked too far away, falling down after a few meters. However, when Ma Jinfeng landed, he could not stand up at all. He held his stomach with a painful expression, and a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Zhang Heng was dumbfounded. He knew Ma Jinfeng's strength very well. He was at the peak of Foundation establishment and was only 22 years old. In the entire Federation, he could be called a genius. That kid kicked Ma Jinfeng until he could not stand up. Who was he? That kid's aura was clearly very weak. Zhang Heng was stunned. Young Master Zhang's eyes turned into two small dots. The genius expert Ma Jinfeng, who was ranked 109th on the North Star University's Star Glory list, was crippled just like that. This kick caused the anger in young Master Zhang's heart to dissipate. It was impossible for a young man who was stronger than Ma Jinfeng to not have any background. Young Master Jiang suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Su Wanqing's eyes flashed. That young man's kick contained a powerful force of spirit qi and law. Without a Jin Dan cultivator, it was impossible to comprehend it. A Jin Dan cultivator? So young? Why have I never seen him before? Chapter 438. Xiaoling River had passed by the entrance of North Star University countless times, but she had never entered. The world inside was like a fairyland to the little girl. Little brother, what's your name? You asked for my name last time, but I didn't ask for yours. Until now, I still don't know your name. Xiaoling River tilted her head and asked expectantly. Li Daochong, Li as in Mu Zi Li, Dao as in reason, Chong as in heaven. Li Daochong introduced himself in detail. Li Daochong, little brother, your name is so unique. I'll call you Brother Daochong from now on, okay? Xiaoling River blinked her big eyes and asked for his opinion. Her innocent look was so cute. Okay, you can call me whatever you want, Li Daochong replied dotingly. Xiaoling River smiled sweetly. Brother Daochong. One adult and one child chatted on the campus of North Star University while leisurely walking around. When they returned to the school gate, it was almost noon. Brother Daochong, thank you for showing me around North Star University. Will we meet again in the future? Xiaoling River asked gratefully and expectantly. Of course. Li Daochong then took out a wristwatch that he had bought as a spare. He handed it to Xiaoling River and said, "Do you know how to use this?" "A little." Xiaoling River had once picked up a broken wristwatch. She fiddled with it out of curiosity for a while. Later, her grandfather took it to be repaired. After using it for half a year, it was thrown away because the talisman chip inside burned. However, the wristwatch that Xiaoling River had picked up was not on the same level as the one in Li Daocheng's hand. "This wristwatch is for you. If you run into any trouble, you can use this to contact me," Li Daocheng said. Xiaoling River wanted it, but she was too embarrassed to accept it. "Brother gave it to you. Take it." Li Daocheng stuffed it into the little girl's hand. "Thank you, Brother Daocheng." Xiaoling River really wanted this wristwatch. Not only did it have many uses, but more importantly, she could contact Li Daocheng through it. "Where do you live? I'll send you back." Li Daocheng was very curious about this little girl's family. Why did she have to make a living at such a young age? Wasn't it too cruel for an 8 or 9-year-old girl? "There's no need, little brother. My house is nearby. I can go back by myself." Xiao Lingxi was reluctant to part with him. Since she was young, no one had protected her like this little brother. Although they had only met twice, Xiao Lingxi felt as if they had known each other for a long time. Because of the death of her parents at a young age, Xiaoling River had experienced too many things that other children her age had never experienced. The world was cold and indifferent. This was the view that Xiaoling River's young heart had of the world. Li Daocheng's appearance was like a clear stream, bringing some color to Xiaoling River's young heart. Li Daocheng saw that Xiaoling River was unwilling to send him back and did not insist. "Be careful on your way back. If you run into any trouble, you can contact me at any time." Xiaoling River nodded vigorously. "Okay, Brother Daocheng. Don't blame me for being troublesome." Li Daocheng smiled. "Little girl, don't think so much. I'm already your brother. I can't let you call me that for nothing. I'm taking advantage of you." Xiaoling River stuck out her tongue. "Goodbye, Brother Daocheng." After saying that, she turned around and skipped away along the sidewalk. Li Daocheng's face revealed a slightly wise smile. He suddenly missed the silver bottle. He stared at Xiaoling River's small back. Only when she completely disappeared around the corner did Li Daocheng withdraw his gaze. Only then did he turn around and return to North Star University. Li Daocheng arrived at the registration area. It was already close to noon, so there were not many people. North Star University had a limited number of special enrollees each year. The entire federation only recruited about 500 people. Without enough ability, it was impossible to enter North Star University. The registration area was a temporary cultivation room. There were a few tables inside with a few teachers sitting behind them. In addition, there were a few students helping to organize the information of every student who came to register. Because Su Wanqing was too monstrous, her cultivation level had already surpassed many teachers. Therefore, she was also one of the main interviewers for this registration. "That guy called Li Daocheng hasn't arrived yet?" A middle-aged man asked with a hint of displeasure on his face. "Teacher Shun, Li Daocheng hasn't arrived yet." An assistant student looked at the registration form and replied. The few teachers who went to the 4-ring star region were full of praise for this guy called Li Daocheng. "I thought he was some kind of genius, but now it seems like he's nothing special. A person who doesn't even abide by the time shouldn't have a good sense of self-awareness. How could he endure cultivation? I think he probably had some kind of fortuitous encounter that gave him this bit of strength. I'm afraid his future achievements will be very limited. Our North Star University is going to be a sucker again this time," the middle-aged man surnamed Shin said while shaking his head. "Teacher Shun, why are you in such a hurry? That Li Daocheng won't be assigned to your class." Beside him, a fat woman with a big body and big ears was holding a big piece of cake in her hand and eating nonstop. She muttered with a strange expression. "Although he won't be assigned to my class, the university has to fork out a lot of resources to increase the quota. Moreover, this Li Daocheng enjoyed a lot of preferential treatment when he was recruited. Not only did he have a scholarship, but he also had a lot of special privileges. I heard that Tang Xian vouched for him, and the principal directly gave him a first-class resource allocation." "Su Wanqing, you're only enjoying first-class resources, right?" Teacher Shun turned to look at Su Wanqing, who was sitting at the side. Su Wanqing didn't reply and just nodded indifferently. She had no interest in participating in the conversation between the teachers. Today's task was to record the characteristics of every new student who came to register. After that, they would be screened. The best new students would be recommended to a few professors in the cultivation department. This was a routine every time they recruited students. Su Wanqing was a little absent-minded the entire morning. Her thoughts were stuck on the strange young man's kick this morning. Ma Shifeng's strength could be considered one of the best among the Federation's younger generation. North Star University was ranked 109th on the Star Glory list. Its value was quite high. There were only a few schools in the entire Federation that could be compared to North Star University. Therefore, it could be estimated that Ma Shifeng's strength could be ranked around 400th to 500th in the entire Federation. This was quite an impressive ranking. The Federation's star field was vast. With the 9 star fields added together, the human population was an unimaginably large number. It was more than a few hundred million. There were tens of thousands of cultivation planets of various sizes. It was also because of this large population that the highest level of cultivation could be nurtured. The number of the younger generation was similarly large. There were close to 1 trillion competitors. To be able to rank in the top 500 was not an exaggeration to call them monsters. However, Ma Shifeng couldn't even withstand a single kick from the young man. He couldn't stand up for a long time. If Su Wanqing hadn't given him a vitality-cleansing pill, he would have been squatting outside the school gate for the entire day. If it had been a middle-aged man who kicked Ma Shifeng, Su Wanqing wouldn't have been so curious. That young man looked younger than her. Could it be that he was already a Jindan cultivator? Su Wanqing couldn't help but be curious about the strange young man she met this morning. She felt like she had seen him somewhere before, but she couldn't remember where. There were 4 examiners at the reporting office. The middle-aged man surnamed Chun, the fat, gluttonous woman, Su Wanqing, and another old man. The old man had been dozing off. In fact, he had been dozing off the entire morning. He didn't even bother to ask about the new students who came to report. His snoring was deafening. However, no one dared to disturb him. This old man was an absolute veteran of North Star University. Even if the principal came, he could only stare at him. The old man was none other than the head of the refining school, Kyle Yin, whom old Devil Zhang had mentioned. He was one of the few 1-star refiners in the Federation. On planet North Star, many Yuaning old monsters would find Kyle Yin and ask him to help refine or repair magic treasures. Capable old men usually had strange tempers. Kyle Yin was also the same. Today, he came to make up the numbers in order to avoid a visit from his old comrades. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come to review the new students. In Kyle Yin's catchphrase, it had nothing to do with him. Since he came, Kyle Yin didn't just focus on sleeping. He also secretly observed the quality of the new students. Unfortunately, after a whole morning, not a single new student could enter his eyes. When he heard the conversation between the fat woman and the middle-aged man surnamed Shun, Kyle Yin asked, "Are you two here to review the new students or to spout nonsense?" As soon as Kyle Yin spoke, the middle-aged man surnamed Chen's eyes tightened. You could offend anyone at North Star University, but not this old man. If you offended him, you would have a hard time. He would definitely make you question why you even existed in this world. Unlike the man with the surname Chun, the fat woman didn't seem to care at all. She opened her mouth and swallowed the cake in her hand. She said as if she hadn't had enough, "Kyle Yin, you slept for the whole morning and you still have the nerve to talk. Continue sleeping." If someone else had spoken to Kyle Yin like that, the old man would have thrown a bunch of magic treasures at them. But when the fat woman said that, Kyle Yin didn't get angry at all. Instead, the corners of his mouth twitched. This fat woman was one of the people Kyle Yin didn't want to easily offend. Despite her appearance, she had a prominent reputation in the Federation's cultivator army. She had the Federation's special military merit, was a disabled soldier, retired sergeant, and all kinds of honorary identities. 20 years ago, it was this fat woman who went to the depths of the Hades alone and rescued a company of cultivator technicians. On the way back, they were chased by the Hades. This fat woman relied on her own strength to kill her way out. She brought everyone back safely, but she herself was seriously injured and Yuanying was injured. She lay in the hospital for half a year and soaked in special spirit liquid for more than 3 months before she slowly recovered. However, her cultivation level dropped by a realm and there was no possibility of it improving. Back then, the fat woman was called Fatty Fairy in the Federation. Yuanying late-stage cultivator was considered a great expert in the Federation. Later on, her cultivation level dropped, and she was now Yuanying middle stage. Fatty Tyrant Fairy was constantly eating. It was as if eating was the only joy in her life. Nothing could stop her from eating. The word fat represented her body shape, while the word tyrant represented her personality. Even Kyle Yin didn't want to provoke her and was somewhat afraid of her. The middle-aged man surnamed Shun was the weakest of the 3 teachers. He was only at the peak of Jin Dan and was comparable to Su Wanqing. But in terms of strength, this teacher Shun couldn't compare to Su Wanqing. Just as the fat woman was about to rebuke Kyle Yin, a young man walked in. Su Wanqing raised her head and a trace of surprise appeared on her fair face. The young man who came in was the one who crippled Yuan Shifeng with a kick in the morning. Li Daocheng entered the reporting area and glanced at the 4 teachers sitting behind tables. Finally, he walked to Su Wanqing's table. "You're a teacher? I thought you were a student." Chapter 439. "I'm not a teacher," Su Wanqing replied without any reason. "Aren't you?" Li Daocheng shrugged. "Are you here to report?" Su Wanqing asked uncertainly. "Why else would I be here?" Li Daocheng retorted. Su Wanqing glanced at Li Daocheng, then lowered her head and picked up a form. "Name?" Li Daocheng. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The pen in Su Wanqing's hand paused, and 3 pairs of eyes simultaneously looked at Li Daocheng from different directions. Teacher Shun sized up Li Daocheng from head to toe, looking as if he wanted to see through Li Daocheng. Fatty Fairy picked up another piece of cake and wolfed it down, looking at Li Daocheng while eating. Kyle Yin did not know much about the new students. He had just overheard the conversation between the 2 teachers and wanted to see what was so special about this new student who had a very high evaluation. After the 3 pairs of eyes swept over Li Daocheng, they all seemed a little disappointed. There was nothing special about this young man. He was even a little mediocre. They could not see any characteristics at all, and the aura on his body was very weak. Of course, he must have used a chi restraining technique. His true cultivation level could not be at the chi refinement realm. Otherwise, how could he have gotten 2nd place in the 100 schools joint examination? Among all the people present, Su Wanqing was the most shocked. She paused for a while before writing the 3 words Li Daocheng on the form. "Age, 19, Su Wanqing almost lost her grip on the pen in her hand. The scene that happened in the morning appeared in her mind again. He was only 19 years old? How is that possible? He could kick a peak foundation establishment genius to the point that he could not stand up at the age of 19. Su Wanqing was already monstrous enough. When she was 19 years old, she had no problem defeating a peak foundation establishment cultivator, but she definitely could not kick a peak foundation establishment cultivator into a cripple. "Where are you from?" "Blue Bay Star, Tianyuan City." "Are your parents still alive?" "My father is still alive. My mother passed away many years ago." After filling in the basic information, Su Wanqing asked Li Daocheng some questions and then handed the form to Mr. Shun. The 3 of them had a clear division of labor. Su Wanqing was responsible for filling in the forms and conducting the physical examination of the freshmen. Mr. Shun was responsible for the review and filling in the first impression evaluation. Fei Ba Fairy's mission was to analyze the personality of each student and record it down. Su Wanqing immediately got up and brought Li Daocheng to an apparatus that was taller than a person to conduct a physical examination. The main thing was to see if there were any hidden ailments, diseases, or any other diseases that were hard to detect. If there were any, this new student's potential value would be written down by a lot. The other test was to test the strength of one's cultivation. As long as these 2 points were above the standards set by North Star University, then the new student's future achievements would at least reach the peak of Jindan. Whether or not he could condense Yuanying would depend on his luck. Li Daocheng had never liked this kind of test, but he had to enter the school. If he didn't go through this test, he wouldn't be able to enter the school. Li Daocheng stood on the apparatus unwillingly. Su Wanqing operated it from the side, and soon the apparatus began to operate. After a few minutes, there was a beep. The apparatus automatically made a mechanical sound. Test complete. The tester's cultivation is at the peak of Jindan middle stage. There are no hidden ailments or diseases. His body is healthy and has been reborn. After the announcement, Mr. Shun's face suddenly felt hot. This was the most perfect test result of the day. There was no other. It could be said that this was the most perfect result in the past few decades. Even when Su Wanqing entered the school, her test results weren't so perfect. Her physical body's evaluation results were lower. Fei Ba Fairy, who had just lost interest, immediately recovered. She picked up another piece of cake and continued to eat. The whole process wasn't complicated. It was completed in 10 minutes. Li Daocheng's name was entered into the file, and he was officially a student of North Star University. After it was over, just as Li Daocheng was about to leave the registration office, the North Star University's internal broadcast came from outside. The voice was very urgent. Attention all teachers and students. Attention all teachers and students. Please gather at the plaza immediately. Please gather at the plaza immediately. There is an emergency announcement. There is an emergency announcement. It is of great importance. Please gather at the plaza within 5 minutes. This is not a drill. This is not a drill. These words began to repeat over and over again. Kyle Yin's old face, which had been in a relaxed state, suddenly froze. He seemed to know what was going on. Without saying a word, he put his hands behind his back and walked towards the plaza first. Fei Ba Fairy threw down the cake in her hand disappointedly and also walked out of the registration office. The others followed suit. Xingchen Plaza was the plaza of North Star University. It was a super plaza that could accommodate more than 100,000 people. At this moment, there was a sea of people here. As long as the teachers and students heard the broadcast, they would immediately rush here. On the ground, on the sky, one by one, they used the fastest method to reach the plaza. More than 100,000 people really gathered at the plaza within 5 minutes. Moreover, they all stood in the same position as before. There wasn't any chaos at all. Li Daocheng and a group of new students stood at the outer area. They were all new students who had just arrived today. They were very unfamiliar with this place and didn't know what was going on. At the very front of the plaza, there was a very tall podium. At this moment, an old man wearing a black robe stood on top of it with a solemn expression. Behind the old man stood more than 10 men wearing the same clothes, but with a lonely expression. Judging from their clothes, these men didn't seem to be from North Star University. They seemed more like people from the cultivation army. Who's the old man on the podium? A new student asked. Old man, student. The old man you're talking about is the principal of North Star University, Yuan Ying, and the peak cultivator, Li Wanfeng. Gulp. The new student who asked the question swallowed a mouthful of saliva and stuck out his tongue. Li Wanfeng glanced at the crowd and then said, Students of North Star University, more than 10 hours ago, Demon Subduing City on 13 Spectre was breached by the Hades. More than 1 million soldiers and soldiers stationed, they are in deep danger. The 3 cultivator cities behind Demon Subduing City were also attacked fiercely. If Demon Subduing City isn't taken back within 3 days, the other 3 cultivator cities will also be captured. At that time, 13 Spectre will be completely occupied by the Hades. We won't even have an inch of land left on 13 Spectre. Once we lose control of 13 Spectre, the Federation will no longer be complete, including within the 3rd ring starfield. Everyone should be clear about the uniqueness of 13 Spectre. When Rakshas Estate launched a crazy attack on 13 Spectre in the Hades, the pressure on the front lines increased abruptly. All the space cracks outside the 5th ring starfield expanded at the same time. The Federation's cultivation army was under great pressure and couldn't transfer more troops to 13 Spectre. The Fifth Ring starfield was ambushed, and the teachers and students of the Grand Pass Combat Academy are fighting a bloody battle. Qingsu University has already gone to support them, and the Spirit Talisman College has provided 1 million Spirit Talismans. North Star University will go to 13 Spectre with the teachers and students of St. Hua University. We must attack that place within 3 days. Otherwise, after 3 days, the Spirit Array in Demon Subduing City will be destroyed. Once it is destroyed, the outer layer of 13 Spectre will completely disappear. At that time, 13 Spectre will be like a virus spreader, spreading the dark ghosts on 13 Spectre to every corner of the Federation. It will be a destructive hero. Li Wanfeng's words were shocking. All the teachers and students in the square were shocked. In the morning, everything was as peaceful as usual, but now they had entered a state of combat readiness. This was actually not the first time a crisis had occurred. In the hundreds of years that the Federation had fought against the Hades, such a situation had occurred at least 10 times. However, every time, the danger was averted and the Hades attack was blocked. However, in the previous 10 times, 13 Spectre had never been captured. The human cultivators had always firmly occupied half of 13 Spectre. The crisis this time seemed to be more dangerous than any of the previous ones. Li Daochong, who was in the crowd, revealed a hint of excitement. 13 Spectre, huh? His next step was to go to 13 Spectre. Now that something like this had happened, it would save him a lot of trouble. He didn't even need to spend spirit stones. The Federation would definitely send people over directly. North Star University's cultivation department had a total of 70,000 teachers and students, which accounted for 70% of the school's population. Naturally, they would be the ones heading to 13 Spectre. The other departments basically didn't have any battle-type cultivators, so it would be useless for them to go. Li Wanfeng quickly divided up the teams with a few veteran teachers. 70,000 people were already an entire army in the cultivation army. The 70,000 people were divided into 3 divisional units and 100 regimental units. Each regiment was a mobile unit made up of more than 700 teachers and students. This distribution was for the sake of organizing an effective force in a simple and effective manner. Once they entered 13 Spectre, it would be easier to coordinate and command them. With so many people entering 13 Spectre, it would definitely be a huge project. The consumption of spirit stones would also be an astronomical figure. However, half of them would need to enter 13 Spectre through the space shuttle. This group of people would be in a much greater danger because they couldn't control where they would land. The energy on 13 Spectre was too chaotic. There was spirit chi, death chi, corpse chi, miasma, and all sorts of other things. Once the space shuttle entered, it would become blind, and the flying spirit array would also deviate. In short, everything would become uncontrollable. In the end, the space shuttle would land at an unknown location. If it landed near Fengdu City on 13 Spectre, it would be over. Fengdu City was the same as the human cultivator city of Demon Subduing. It was a city built by dark ghosts. To put it bluntly, it was a ghost city with millions of Hades inside. Yuanian cultivators who landed there would have a 90% chance of survival. Initial estimates put the number of witch ghosts in Fengdu City at over 100. Attacking 13 Spectre this time could also earn military merits. The more ghosts the teachers and students killed, the more points they would earn. The rules were exactly the same as before on 13 Spectre. Not only that, if they won in the end, the military would also reward them with a large amount of resources. After a day of preparation, the 30,000 people who used the teleportation array would first head to 13 Spectre and directly enter Demon Subduing City to fight the Dark Ghosts. Those who rode the space shuttle would have to wait a day before setting off. Other than that, the freshmen and the hundreds of freshmen who were specially recruited would have to delay their departure for a week. The reason for this arrangement was to see how the battle was going. If the teachers and students sent in front of them had already attacked 13 Spectre or the situation was good, then there was no need for the freshmen to go. If the battle situation was shocking, then they could only force the freshmen to go to the front lines to kill the enemy. The freshmen naturally did not know what the higher-ups were thinking. They thought that they were being taken care of. Li Daochong thought that he would be able to go to 13 Spectre immediately. He was a freshman, but he actually had to wait a week before setting off. However, Li Daochong thought about it and felt that setting off a week later was not bad. It just so happened that Song Ink had not been repaired yet. If Old Man Zhang could repair Song Ink in this week and bring Song Ink to 13 Spectre, their safety would be increased. After Li Daochong entered Jindan, he could almost crush his opponent in every battle. However, Li Daochong knew that this was not because he was invincible, but because he had not met a truly powerful opponent. Li Daochong returned to shop number 18 and did not see Old Man Zhang. Princess Catherine was still busy with the decorations. Li Daochong saw that the shop was almost ready. Everything was ready except for the east wind, which was naturally the talisman. The materials for level 1 to level 8 talismans could be easily obtained. They could be bought anywhere on miscellaneous treasure street. After arranging for Princess Catherine to purchase the talismans, Li Daochong immediately began to make talismans. It was easy for 2 million anometer spiritual brains to make talismans below level 10. They could make 10 talismans at the same time. After half a day, Li Daochong made hundreds of talismans. The highest level was level 6, and the lowest was level 1. There were all kinds of talismans, from voice transmission talismans to fire talismans, from invisibility talismans to ice talismans, explosive talismans, and sword talismans. Basically, there were all kinds of talismans on the market. With so many talismans, the empty counter was filled, and half of the shelves were filled. These low-level talismans were not enough. High-level talismans were also needed. However, high-level talismans were not allowed to be sold casually. One had to have a special business license. Li Daochong contacted Wei Beitong for this. The latter quickly got Li Daochong a special equipment business license, which was similar to the one in the Shadow Serene workshop. Wei Beitong had many complaints about Li Daochong. More than a month ago on Blue Bay Star, the two had agreed to meet in half a month. In the end, Li Daochong let Wei Beitong off the hook. Li Daochong could do nothing about it. How could he have known that so many things would happen on Red Sun Planet? He promised, but didn't go. Li Daochong knew something was wrong. He immediately had Wei Beitong come to North Star and teach him the Qi therapy. Wei Beitong was an impatient man. He came as soon as he said he would. An hour later, he was standing in front of Li Daochong. Seeing Wei Beitong appear so quickly, Li Daochong couldn't help but admire the old man's enthusiasm. Even young people weren't as impatient as him. Wei Beitong didn't show any dissatisfaction at Li Daochong's reneging. Not only did he bring the materials he'd promised Li Daochong, but he also brought a few extra trinkets. These materials were exactly what Li Daochong needed for the next stage of his talismans. Naturally, Li Daochong accepted them without hesitation. The more materials there were, the better. It would be better if he didn't need them. But because Wei Beitong was in such a hurry, Li Daochong's talismans weren't finished yet. He had to make the old man wait for another day. Later that night, Zhang Lao returned. He asked Li Daochong for the chilling Soul Source Crystal and Heavy Silver Age Nucleus Marrow, then left. Zhang Lao told Li Daochong that his old friend had agreed to help him repair Song Ink. With the addition of Kyle Yin, the speed of Song Ink's repair would be greatly increased. Zhang Lao estimated it would take less than 5 days to complete. A day later, Li Daochong began teaching Wei Beitong some simple Qi therapy. In fact, Li Daochong himself didn't know how to use Qi therapy. From the beginning, it was the pure spirit energy, transformed by the hot-blooded upgrader, that allowed his spirit energy to have a strong repair function. But over time, Li Daochong himself also had some insights. Since everything in the world was born under spirit energy could naturally repair them. Time passed day by day like this, and soon 5 days passed. Wei Beitong was very excited about the Qi therapy. Every day, he pulled Li Daochong and asked him all kinds of questions. Li Daochong patiently explained to the old man. In the evening, Zhang Lao rushed into shop number 18 with disheveled hair and a dirty face. "Brotherly, your Tsang ink is repaired. Your Tsang ink is repaired." Zhang Lao rushed into the backyard excitedly. Li Daochong was sitting in the pavilion drinking tea. When he heard Zhang Lao's voice, he immediately stood up with an expectant look on his face. Zhang Lao carried a long wooden box on his back and handed it to Li Daochong. "Open it and take a look." Li Daochong held his breath and gently opened the lid. When a gap was revealed, a Tsang ink color light shot out from inside. A cyclone rose from the box. When the box was opened, a Tsang ink color straight back long saber lay quietly inside. One could clearly feel the threatening aura of the saber. Ordinary people would feel dizzy just by looking at it. They couldn't stand the terrifying aura emitted from the saber. Tsang ink didn't change much this time. At least, there was almost no change in appearance. The length and thickness were the same. The only difference was that the width of the Tsang ink blade had increased slightly from the original width of 4 fingers to 3 inches. The increased width made the Tsang ink look more domineering. Li Daochong reached out and picked up the Tsang ink, but he couldn't pick it up at first. It was too heavy. After adding the heavy silver age nucleus marrow, the saber's weight increased greatly. It also increased the power of the Tsang ink to another level. The weight itself was a form of attack. Without any cultivation method or spirit chi, a weapon of 10,000 pounds could easily kill a large number of people. Brotherly, Kai Lian and I have studied and used the latest refining methods and the insights of an ancient refining master. We have completely merged the 2 kinds of magic gold you obtained into the Tsang ink. Now, the Tsang ink is no longer an ordinary weapon. It is a heavenly mystery true treasure, which is 1 level higher than a mystical spirit treasure. However, because it doesn't have a weapon spirit, the Tsang ink only reached the level of a heavenly mystery true treasure. Its form is not. You'll have to find a weapon spirit yourself, Zhang Lao said with some regret. Elder Zhang, thank you. Li Daochong played with the Tsang ink a few times. With a wave of his hand, the Tsang ink flew into his storage ring. 2 days later, the battle at 13 Spectre reached its climax. The human cultivators didn't gain an overwhelming advantage. The freshmen of North Star University boarded the military transport shuttle according to the prearranged time and headed to 13 Spectre. Li Daochong was naturally among them. He stood in front of the round window of the shuttle and gazed at the stars outside. He couldn't help but feel excited. Chapter 440. The space shuttle shuttled through the universe at high speed. It would perform a space jump every hour. 2 days later, the space shuttle flew above a scorched planet. In addition to the blackness, there were some brownish-red spots. The largest one was half the size of the planet. It was the red ocean on 13 Spectre. The space shuttle did not stop. It continued to fly toward the atmosphere of 13 Spectre. After a series of bumps, it finally entered the atmosphere of 13 Spectre. At this time, it was difficult for the space shuttle to fly steadily. From below, the space shuttle spiritual formation would occasionally send a message. Jinanwo, cute Momo 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 Pixie, support. There were a total of 12 military transport shuttles transporting the students of North Star University. Each shuttle could accommodate more than 1,000 students. 12 shuttles meant more than 10,000 people. This was also the last support the Federation could use. If this batch of reinforcements could not change the situation, then Shadow Demon Star would truly fall and become a possession of the underworld. Why did the Nether Realm suddenly go crazy and launch a full-scale invasion of the Shenghua Federation? The Federation's think tank researched for a week and still could not come to a conclusion. In short, Hades's madness this time was inexplicable and without reason. It was even a bit of a self-inflicted injury. Li Daochong might be able to guess the real reason, but no one knew what was going on. Luo Yingsha had suffered such a huge loss, so how could she take this lying down? Which goes Xiang Yu was most likely still alive, and he would become Luo Yingsha's strongest supporter. As for Chu Qianyue, She could not wait for the Rakshasa state and the Shenhua Federation to fight. Only then would she have a chance to kill Xing Yuo. In fact, this battle would come sooner or later. What difference did it make if it happened earlier or later? That day at the old mansion, Li Daocheng already knew what Chu Qianyue was thinking. The reason why he showed an indifferent attitude was because Li Daocheng knew that this battle was unavoidable. Even if Chu Qianyue did nothing, or she was not the descendant of the witch ancestor, the battle between the Rakshasa state and the Shenhua Federation would also happen. It would be better for the Federation if it happened earlier. The longer the Rakshasa state recuperated, the stronger it would be, and the more likely it would be to swallow the Federation. Therefore, the earlier it happened, the better. However, Li Daocheng did not expect it to happen so quickly. He thought that it would take at least a few years. After the flying space shuttle lost control and flew for a while, the spirit formation was completely destroyed. It glided through the void and landed on a piece of scorched black earth. After years of continuous fighting, this super cultivation planet, which was originally as rich in spiritual chi as the central star area of the Federation, was now full of holes and scorched black. It was like hell on earth. Every inch of the ground was emitting a nauseating smell of sulfur, almost no different from the ghost planets in the Hades. The flying space shuttle opened, and more than 1,000 students, led by more than 10 teachers, abandoned the shuttle. They followed the map and headed toward the demon subduing city. "Teacher, look, that flying space shuttle was hit by something. It's on fire," a student suddenly exclaimed. The students raised their heads and looked. Sure enough, a flying space shuttle that was exactly the same as the one they had just abandoned was burning in flames and falling into the distance. A few teachers sighed. "We can't care about them anymore. Let's go. We have to get to the demon subduing city within 2 days. Otherwise, they won't be able to hold on." After saying that, the teacher took out a magic treasure and stepped on it to fly away. The students followed. Using magic treasures on 13 Spectre was much more difficult than on a cultivation planet. These students were all geniuses selected from all over the world. If they did not have the ability, they would not have been chosen by the North Star University. In such an environment, they could still control their magic treasures. More than 1,000 people flew into the sky and flew toward the demon subduing city. After flying for dozens of kilometers, a black shadow appeared in front of them. The leading teacher's face changed. Not good, it's a group of malicious ghosts. Soon, the group of ghosts and cultivators collided. The sky was a mess, and the sharp screams of the malicious ghosts could be heard in the air. Boom, bang, crack, flames, sword beams, and saber shadows bloomed in the air. A small skirmish broke out. Li Daocheng was not in this wave of people. He was in the burning flying space shuttle that was about to crash. Li Daocheng's flying space shuttle malfunctioned not long after entering the atmosphere of 13 Spectre. When it approached the ground, it encountered a group of ghost crows. Hundreds of ghost crows attacked the flying space shuttle with all their might. The food inside was too tempting for them. However, the outer shell of the military transport flying space shuttle was made of star spirit crystals, so how could it be so easy to break? However, no matter how hard it was, it could not withstand the endless attacks of hundreds of ghost crows. In the end, the outer shell was shattered. One of the ghost crows went deep into the engine and exploded. Li Daocheng originally wanted to use a god art to stop the falling flying space shuttle, but doing so would consume a lot of his energy. On the Hellstar like 13 Spectre, where one could encounter soul-catcher ghosts, or even witch ghosts at any time, it was unwise to waste his energy for no reason. Due to the harsh environment of 13 Spectre, it was very difficult to recover one's energy. It could only be recovered bit by bit. There was no other way. Being exhausted on 13 Spectre was tantamount to death. Li Daocheng put away his kindness and stood at the back of the flying space shuttle, waiting for it to crash. When it was less than a kilometer from the ground, the students jumped out of the flying space shuttle. Li Daocheng also jumped out. More than 1,000 students scattered in the air like flowers falling from the heavens. Boom! With a loud sound, the flying space shuttle crashed into the ground and turned into a firework. Pa! Li Daochong landed steadily on a piece of scorched earth. Looking around, he saw jagged rocks of grotesque shapes everywhere. There were bumps and hollows everywhere. Most of the 1,000 students were able to escape from the flying space shuttle. Only a few unlucky ones were caught or knocked unconscious by the black crows. In the end, they crashed into the ground with the flying space shuttle and turned into ashes. There were no other students where Li Daochong landed. Using his spirit sense, he found that the closest student was about a few hundred meters away from him. Following a large group was never Li Daochong's style. He preferred to act alone. He had to save the demon-subduing city. If the city really fell, the 13th Spectre would be in the hands of the dark ghosts. Li Daochong would not let Hades succeed no matter what. Li Daochong detected a few auras coming towards him. Then, his figure flashed and disappeared into the darkness. When the students passed by, they did not notice that someone had been here before. Li Daochong ran all the way. He remembered the approximate location of the demon-subduing city in his mind. If he was not wrong, the demon-subduing city was about 8,000 kilometers away from his current location. If he flew, he would be able to reach it in 5 or 6 hours. But that way, Li Daochong would lose the best opportunity to kill monsters and level up, so running all the way to the demon-subduing city was the best way. After running for dozens of kilometers, Li Daochong could no longer sense anyone's aura. Only then did he stop. Running over, Li Daochong felt a little strange. Where did those dark ghosts go? Why didn't he meet a single one after running such a long distance? Li Daochong did not stop and continued to head towards the demon-subduing city. However, he did not walk in a straight line, but in an arc, increasing the distance between them. However, the chances of Li Daochong finding the dark ghosts would greatly increase. Li Daochong walked for a while more, when he heard a soft cry for help. Li Daochong frowned. There was someone here. As Li Daochong continued to walk forward, the cry for help became clearer and clearer. He was sure that it was the voice of a young woman. Li Daochong probed with his mind, and his expression changed slightly. It really was a person, and with a tap of his foot, his entire body shot out like an arrow. Li Daochong stood behind a black reef and saw that in a stone forest, a man and 2 women were forced into a corner by 2 buck-toothed boars and a resentful bone. Buck-toothed boar was actually a type of black wild boar that had 2 thick, long, and sharp fangs protruding from its mouth. Of course, its skin had already hardened and was filled with a rancid smell. One of the women looked like she was about to die, and the cry was from this woman. The other man and woman tried to save the woman at first, but in the end, they simply gave up and allowed the 2 buck-toothed boars to gnaw on the woman. The resentful bone reached out with its bony hand and dug out the woman's heart, swallowing it in one gulp. The heart could clearly be seen as it was digested in the resentful bone's stomach, disappearing bit by bit, and the white bones on the resentful bone began to turn red. The remaining man and woman were both Foundation Establishment cultivators. The man was late Foundation Establishment, and the woman was mid-Foundation Establishment. The two of them seemed to be in a dual relationship. Yulang, what do we do now? The female cultivator grabbed the man's hand and said in fear, Jasmine, don't worry, I definitely won't leave you behind. I've thought of a good idea. Perhaps we can escape. The man called Yulang said with a stern expression. What good idea? Jasmine asked as if she was grasping at straws. I'll lure them away. You run first, and I'll chase after you. The man replied with a righteous expression. No, Yulang. Jasmine's relaxed expression suddenly tightened, and she shook her head with all her might. Jasmine, don't be stubborn at this time. If you want to live, listen to me, Yulang said patiently. Okay, I'll listen to you. Jasmine nodded obediently. The 2 buck-toothed boars gnawed on the dead female cultivator's corpse. After the resentful bone completely digested the heart, it looked at Yulang and Jasmine with 2 balls of faint blue flames in its empty skeletal eyes. Run, Yulang said in a low voice. Jasmine didn't think too much this time and turned to run. The previous battle had consumed too much of her energy, and she could no longer fly on her sword. She could only run with her 2 legs. However, Jasmine had just taken 2 steps when her arm was grabbed by someone. She turned around and saw that it was Yulang. Jasmine thought that her partner couldn't bear to part with her, and decided that she definitely wouldn't leave her partner behind. Just as she was about to speak, the gentleness in Yulang's eyes disappeared and was replaced by a ruthless look. He exerted force and threw Jasmine towards the resentful bone. Caught off guard, Jasmine couldn't react at all. Moreover, she was already exhausted, so she reacted even more quickly. Only when Jasmine was flung away did she look at the man with a face full of shock. Yulang Yu. The man with the surname Yu smiled coldly. Jasmine, husband and wife, are birds of the same forest. When disaster strikes, they fly away separately. Don't blame me. I'll definitely burn incense for you later. You'll die a worthy death. With that, the man with the surname Yu turned and ran. Meanwhile, Jasmine fell into the resentful bone's arms and was caught. The resentful bone, which had just eaten its fill, didn't seem to want to continue eating. Instead, it let out a terrifying roar. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of heavy footsteps could be heard from afar. The man with the surname Yu had just run a few hundred meters when he bumped into a rotting violent bear. It was 5 to 6 meters tall and had a huge body. Its mouth emitted a foul stench, and there were always traces of blood on the side of its mouth. The man with the surname Yu cursed. Damn it. He thought that he had escaped, but he didn't expect that this was 13 Spectre. It didn't matter where he was. The rotting violent bear bit down and swallowed the man with the surname Yu's head. As for the corpse, it kicked it away. The rotting violent bear went berserk in front of the resentful bone. The latter threw Jasmine at the rotting violent bear's feet. Gullah gullah. The resentful bone's mouth made many messy sounds. Li Daochong, who was hiding behind a large rock, couldn't understand a single word. However, the rotting violent bear understood and nodded repeatedly. Chapter 441. The rotting violent bear tore open Jasmine's clothes and pants, and the slightly rotten bear penis in its lower body stood straight up. Ghost beasts have this ability? Li Daochong was surprised. Jasmine let out a heart-wrenching scream. No, you beast, I'm going to kill you. But all her struggles were futile. Both the rotting violent bear and the vengeful bone were stronger than a mid-stage foundation establishment cultivator. Only a peak foundation establishment cultivator could fight against these 2 ghosts. Just as Jasmine was in despair, a black blade aura whistled and cut the rotting violent bear in half. A wisp of dark green mist entered Li Daochong's body. Beep. Killed a rotting violent bear. Obtained soul power. Converted to spirit energy. The hot-blooded level-up device routinely issued a notification. The spirit energy in Li Daochong's body had indeed increased by a little. Roar. Seeing the rotting violent bear cut in half, the vengeful bone let out an earth-shattering roar. But before the vengeful bone could see clearly what had killed its ghost pet, another Tsung ink-colored blade aura came. The vengeful bone was cut in half vertically, and its bones shattered. The cutting effect of the blade aura was very domineering. The vengeful bone's scattered bones tried to reassemble, but before they could do so, they were torn apart into a pile of powder. Beep. Killed a vengeful bone. Obtained soul power. Converted to spirit energy. The spirit energy in Li Daochong's body increased by a little again. Previously, a vengeful bone was enough for Li Daochong to increase his cultivation level by 1 level. Now it could only increase it by a little, barely enough to fill the gap between his teeth. When the vengeful bone was killed, the 2 buck-toothed pigs that were still chewing on their food finally reacted. But when they looked up, their heads had already been cut off. The buck-toothed pigs were not as high level as the rotting violent bear. That bit of spirit energy was negligible to Li Daochong. Jasmine lay naked on the cold, scorched ground, staring blankly at the man who had appeared out of nowhere. Her expression was a little stiff. The person she trusted the most had abandoned her in the most dangerous moment and used her as bait. This kind of blow was unbearable for anyone. Jasmine felt that her heart had died at this moment. He no longer had any attachment to the world. Even if a young man suddenly appeared and saved her, she felt that it would be better to die. "Thank you." Jasmine politely thanked him without a trace of emotion. She looked up at the sky, her eyes empty. "There's no need to thank me. I didn't plan to save you, because I can't save someone whose heart has given up. Do you want to continue lying down or come with me?" Li Daochong asked casually. The Tsang ink in his hand emitted a faint Tsang ink color brilliance, appearing very mysterious on the black, scorched earth. Jasmine silently got up from the ground. Her naked body didn't make her feel any shame, even if there was a young man standing beside her. Jasmine's expression was stiff, her eyes were empty, and her face was full of despair. She didn't say that she wanted to follow Li Daochong, nor did she say that she wanted to stay. She just stood up. Li Daochong pursed his lips. He had no time to enlighten this woman. He put away the Tsang ink and turned to leave. Jasmine also followed along. Li Daochong stopped, and so did Jasmine. However, there wasn't a trace of light in her empty eyes. They were terrifyingly dark. Crazy? This was the only possibility that Li Daochong could think of. He repeatedly stopped and walked, and Jasmine followed him. She kept a distance of 5 meters from Li Daochong. No more, no less, no closer, and no further. When you walk, I walk, and when you stop, I stop. Li Daochong wanted to ask this woman a few more questions about 13 Spectre, but looking at her condition, he knew that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of her. Li Daochong didn't care about Jasmine anymore. He maintained a constant speed and quickly rushed forward. At this speed, Jasmine could still keep up. Just like that, a man and a woman, one in front and one behind, one in green and one in white, moved quickly with a distance of 5 meters between them in the scorched earth of 13 Spectre. After running for more than 10 kilometers, Li Daochong seemed to hear some vibrations. He stopped and listened. It was coming from behind. Li Daochong turned around. Jasmine quickly ran behind him and put a distance of 5 meters between them. She stood there obediently, her eyes empty. Li Daochong's lips curled into a smile as he stared into the distance. "Since you've delivered yourself to me, why not?" Not long after, black dust filled the sky in the distance. A group of rotting violent bears carrying vengeful bones ran over, each of them wielding a short knife. Ghost Cavalry was a unit that often appeared on the battlefield of the Hades. The combination of vengeful bones and rotting violent bears was the lowest level of Ghost Cavalry. The other type was the combination of Balrog and Soul Catcher, the Ghost Cavalry. There were more than 30 rotting bear cavalrymen charging over, and their momentum was like a rainbow. Li Daochong clenched his fist and punched out. A tornado of energy formed a fist and punched out. Boom, boom. The wind shadow fist left a deep imprint on the ground. Boom. The giant fist sent the group of rotting violent bears flying into the sky. The power of the fist had a terrifying, tearing effect. The rotting violent bears exploded in the air, while the vengeful bones turned into bone powder. A single punch had crushed the Ghost Cavalry into powder. Jasmine, who had lost consciousness, stared blankly at this scene and muttered, so powerful. After killing so many vengeful bones and rotting violent bears in one go, Li Daochong's spirit energy had increased significantly. The bottleneck of Jin Dan intermediate stage was already showing signs of loosening. With just a little more spirit energy, Li Daochong would advance to the next level. After killing the Ghost Cavalry, Li Daochong continued forward. Cold, so cold. After walking for a short distance, Jasmine's trembling voice came from behind him. Li Daochong took out a set of spare clothes from his storage ring and threw them to Jasmine. The latter quickly put them on. "Since you've regained your consciousness, don't follow me anymore." After walking for a while, Li Daochong suddenly stopped. There was no response. Li Daochong sniffed. Since there was no response, then he had nothing else to say. He moved his feet and was about to speed up. "Don't leave me alone, okay? I'm scared." Jasmine's timid voice came from behind him. She seemed to have sensed that Li Daocheng was going to abandon her and leave alone. Li Daocheng was just about to refuse when he felt a soft sensation on his back. Jasmine had suddenly rushed up and hugged Li Daocheng tightly from behind. "Little brother, I don't want to die. As long as you take me out of this barren land, I'll do anything you want me to do, okay?" Jasmine was practically begging. The two soft lumps on his back came too suddenly, so Li Daocheng was completely unprepared and was attacked just like that. In that instant, Li Daocheng felt an indescribable throbbing. His state of mind was a little unstable, and a very erotic scene even appeared in his mind. Li Daocheng's psychokinesis moved. Blue and gold lightning flashed across his eyes, and his state of mind quickly returned to normal. But at this moment, Li Daocheng's chest went numb. Looking down, 2 silver needles were deeply pierced into his chest. Li Daocheng's heart violently trembled. This woman pretended to be crazy, followed him naked, and now pitifully threw herself into his arms. All of this was premeditated. The soft lumps on Li Daocheng's back made Li Daocheng feel afraid at this moment. "You were pretending from the moment I appeared?" Li Daocheng asked indifferently. "That's right." Jasmine's voice returned to normal. Her eyes no longer had any emptiness. She let go of Li Daocheng from behind, walked in front of him, and said, "You're so strong. How could I be your opponent if I didn't use some tricks? I saved you, but you want to harm me? What kind of experience made you so scary?" Li Daocheng was puzzled. "You saved me, but I can't harm you? Your logic is very strange, and anyone who thinks like that on Shadow Devil Star would not live for more than 3 days. You should not have saved me, because before you Lang and I came to Shadow Devil Star, we were notorious thieves in the 5-ring star field. It was precisely because we committed a crime that we were exiled to this place." Do you think that a female cultivator like me would feel anything just because you saved me? She looked at Li Daocheng with ridicule in her eyes. Unfortunately, the partner she had chosen for her dual day job did not take her seriously. Otherwise, he would not have thrown her to resentful bones under such circumstances. "How many human cultivators are left on 13 Spectre?" Li Daocheng continued asking. "How many? You're asking me, but who am I supposed to ask? However, I can tell you with certainty that there are definitely more human cultivators on Serene Devil Star than you think, because every month there will be a batch of human cultivators who commit crimes and are exiled here." "All right, you've asked too many questions. Since you saved me, I'll let you die with some understanding," Jasmine said as she took out a dagger from her storage ring and viciously stabbed it towards Li Daocheng's chest. Clang! The dagger stabbed Li Daocheng's chest and broke into 3 pieces as if it had stabbed a hard piece of silver. Jasmine was shocked. What kind of body could be immune to the stab of a heaven-grade weapon? Slap! The motionless Li Daocheng suddenly reached out and grabbed Jasmine's neck. "You, how is this possible?" Jasmine's eyes widened in disbelief as she looked at Li Daocheng, who was moving as if nothing had happened. Li Daocheng's hand suddenly exerted force. Crack! Jasmine's neck was crushed. Her head tilted to the side as she died with her eyes wide open. She could not understand why this young man was completely fine after being hit by her poisonous silver needle. Jasmine's poisonous silver needle was contaminated with the poison of the most poisonous flower on 13 Spectre, the thorny orchid flower's root. This deadly poison of the Hades would cause a human cultivator to lose their strength the moment it entered their bloodstream. Their entire body would stiffen and they would not be able to move for half an hour. After that, their entire body would begin to rot and fester. There was no cure for it. Jasmine would never have guessed that the poison of the Hades was useless against Li Daocheng. Once it entered his body, it would immediately be converted into spirit energy or some other substance that could strengthen his body. Without Jasmine following him, Li Daocheng's speed increased. His search range also increased. He spread out his divine perception, not letting any creature of the Hades go. Along the way, Li Daocheng encountered a few more human cultivators. These human cultivators were each crueler than the last. Their humanity was completely lost on this dark planet. When Li Daocheng heard the cries for help again, He did not meddle in other people's business. He focused on killing monsters and leveling up. Every ghost beast he encountered along the way would be instantly killed by his blade. After traveling for 1,000 kilometers, at least a few hundred Li Daocheng's blade had died under Li Daocheng's blade. Beep. Chapter 442. The Sun Jin's Dan in Li Daocheng's body grew larger at a visible speed. It was the size of an adult male's fist. Some very obvious patterns appeared on the Jin Dan. They were similar to talisman patterns and contained the laws of the world's spiritual energy. The spiritual energy in Li Daocheng's body reached more than twice that of the mid-stage of the Jin Dan. The blue-golden light in his eyes crackled. Li Daocheng sat down cross-legged and began to recuperate. This was a compulsory course after every level up. Otherwise, one's cultivation would not be stabilized. The slightest carelessness could cause one's cultivation to weaken or even drop. The spiritual energy that was absorbed and transformed with great difficulty would be wasted. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes passed. 10 minutes passed. 30 minutes passed. Li Daocheng's body was undergoing drastic changes. The Jin Dan's late stage had reached the end of the Jin Dan stage. After another level up, Li Daocheng's cultivation would enter the peak of the Jin Dan stage. This was the last stage of the Jin Dan stage. The Jin Dan in his body no longer grew. Instead, a baby-like shadow began to appear. It appeared and disappeared, flashing. Yuaning embryos had begun to appear in the Jin Dan. Every time the spiritual energy was absorbed, the embryos would grow little by little. When the Yuaning broke out of the Yuaning stage, it would be the Yuaning stage. When Li Daocheng was about to finish recuperating, his body suddenly shook. He opened his eyes, and a blue-golden light shot out. A Balrog crocodile walked towards Li Daocheng with heavy steps. A mere Balrog crocodile naturally could not attract Li Daocheng's attention. What Li Daocheng was really wary of was the ghost girl sitting on top of the Balrog crocodile's head. The girl's appearance was delicate and petite. She had a cute horn on her head. The two furry cats were very cute. Li Daocheng could not feel any death or underworld energy from the girl at all. However, the unfamiliar aura of the girl made Li Daocheng feel very uncomfortable. Li Daocheng continued to search for valuable information in his memories. Soon his eyes flashed. The unicorn girl's aura was somewhat similar to the Demon King's lingering thoughts in the west wing of shop number 18. Demons? Li Daocheng's heart skipped a beat as he looked at the young girl with fear. In addition, the Balrog crocodile was being led by a burly old man dressed in black. The old man's face looked a little old, but his body didn't show any signs of aging. His skin was smooth, his muscles were firm, and there wasn't a trace of looseness. The old man had 2 horns on his head. His eyes were completely black, and the tip of his nose was also black. His teeth were exposed through his lips, and his face looked ferocious and terrifying. If he saw this face at night, he would most likely be scared half to death. The ferocious Balrog crocodile became as docile as a kitten under the guidance of the old man. It did not dare to resist at all. It did not even have the intention to resist. When the girl sitting on the Balrog crocodile's head was gently stroked, this ferocious ghost beast's throat actually let out a puppy-like purr, expressing its enjoyment and pleasure. No one would have thought that the Balrog crocodile would behave like this. Li Daocheng slowly stood up from the ground. From his point of view, the old man and the young girl were coming for him. Li Daocheng felt a little scared. While he was regulating his breathing, his aura had been reduced to the lowest level. If he was still discovered, how terrifying was the other party's strength? Li Daocheng didn't dare to imagine. Counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. Li Daocheng's expression froze as he waited for the old man and the young girl to walk over. However, halfway through they stopped. The young girl sat on the Balrog crocodile's head and looked around. Seeing no one, she asked with a bored expression, "Great-granduncle, that group of human cultivators arranged a battle with us here. We came all the way here. They won't stand us up, right?" "That's hard to say. Your Highness, You should know that human cultivators are the most untrustworthy. The old man, called great-granduncle by the young girl, said disdainfully. Hearing this, Li Daocheng's heart finally calmed down. The old man and the young girl didn't come here because they sensed his presence. Otherwise, it would be too terrifying. Li Daocheng didn't understand why they would arrange a battle with someone. Li Daocheng calmed down and probed the aura of the old man and the young girl. In the end, he confirmed that it wasn't demonic aura, but sorcery aura. It was similar to the aura of the intercourse, but it was stronger than the intercourse's aura. About 10 minutes later, Li Daocheng looked up and sensed a few powerful auras in the air. Swoosh, swoosh, a few sounds pierced through the air. 3 human cultivators wearing different robes landed in front of the old man and the young girl. The auras of these 3 human cultivators were abnormally powerful. They could be ranked in the top 5 among the cultivators Li Daocheng had met so far. One was at the late stage of yuanying, and the other 2 were at the middle stage of yuanying. Great-granduncle, you came early. We thought you were scared out of your wits. The late-stage yuanying cultivator mocked. Why did this person also call Wu Gui great-granduncle? Li Daocheng was stunned for a moment, but he quickly understood that the old man's name was great-granduncle. When she heard the young girl call the old man great-granduncle, she thought the old man was the young girl's great-granduncle. Yuan Shijin, don't think that you can be arrogant just because you have a mysterious spirit treasure on you. You're so powerful. Why didn't you go to the demon-subduing city to help? Why did you come here to fight with us? Great-granduncle said disdainfully. This old man was originally an exiled prisoner. The safety of the demon-subduing city has nothing to do with me. I just need to earn enough points to atone for my sins. It should be enough to kill all of you today. Yuan Shijin said with a gloomy face. Kill us? Ha ha! Yuan Shijin, have you lost your mind, or have you taken the wrong medicine? Last time, you were kicked into the Red Devil's Sea by this old man. Have you forgotten? Great-granduncle laughed. You have a nerve to talk about 2 against 1. Great-granduncle, your ghost clan is really shameless. Cut the crap, take out your Nether Lotus throne, and let me take a look. Yuan Shijin was too lazy to continue talking nonsense and returned to the main topic. Although the Nether Lotus throne is precious, it's not too rare for this old man. As he spoke, the old man took out a palm-sized black, transparent lotus throne from his bosom. When Yuan Shijin saw the lotus throne, he wanted to rush up and snatch it from the old man. The Nether Lotus throne was a must for making the Great Recovery Pill. The Great Recovery Pill was a super recovery pill. If Yuan Ying took one, he could instantly recover half of his spirit chi. The Nether Lotus throne was not a pure plant of the Hades, but a plant unique to the Hades oasis. The underworld oasis was a very special place. It had the same meaning as a desert oasis. It was surrounded by deserts, but this small area was an oasis. There was water, trees, flowers, and small animals. It was not affected by the desert at all. The Hades oasis was a small place in the Hades that was rich in spirit chi. It was surrounded by death chi, but it was still rich in spirit chi. There were some creatures of the spirit realm living here, so the death chi could not invade. The Hades oasis usually had some extremely precious spirit herbs growing here because the creatures of the Hades rejected spirit chi. The Hades oasis was equivalent to a poisonous land. Dark ghosts would not enter, as they were likely to be annihilated by the spirit chi. Thus, the plants that grew in the Hades oasis could grow for a very long time, and their quality was also better than the plants of the spirit realm. They had a holy quality that could grow out of mud without being stained. The Nether Lotus throne was like this. This kind of Nether Lotus grew in the oasis, and after thousands of years of precipitation, it absorbed a large amount of spirit chi. There was no such thing in the spirit realm, only the Hades. In order to find a Nether Lotus throne, Yuan Shijin could be said to have traveled all over the 13 Spectre. He thought that there should be a place like the Hades Oasis on the planet Humor. However, Yuan Shijin had been exiled for more than 10 years, and he had not seen any sign of the Hades Oasis on the 13 Spectre. This made him feel quite helpless. Recovering spirit chi on the 13th Spectre was a very painful thing. After a battle, Yuanian cultivators would need to rest for at least half a month to recover. During this time, they could not be distracted at all. They could only find a place to hide and do nothing. They could only cultivate and recover as quickly as possible. Just this point alone had caused the deaths of many cultivators. They had all died unjustly. After a battle, they were exhausted, and when they encountered a dark ghost that was not very strong, they were instantly killed. Yuan Shijin did not want to repeat the same mistake. He tried his best to find the Nether Lotus throne, but he could not find it. Helpless, he could only give up. A month ago, Yuan Shijin encountered this great-granduncle in front of her. The two fought fiercely, and no one could determine the winner. In the end, the great-granduncle released his mount, the flame demon crocodile emperor, which was the one the girl was riding. Only then did Yuan Shijin retreat. Yuan Shijin was naturally unconvinced. At that time, he said that he would fight with the great-granduncle. Whoever did not dare was a bastard. Yuan Shijin said those words out of anger, but he did not expect the Ghost Clan elder to agree. The two also agreed to bet. Yuan Shijin did not even think about it and asked for the Nether Lotus throne, while the great-granduncle asked for a Frost Soul Origin Crystal. Coincidentally, Yuan Shijin had a palm-sized Frost Soul Origin Crystal. This thing was similar to the Nether Lotus throne. It did not exist in the Hades, only in the spirit realm. However, the Frost Soul Origin Crystal was an important material for making high-grade shaman treasures. Without it, it could not be refined into high-grade shaman treasures. Sometimes, reality was so messed up. There were two cultivators following Yuan Shijin. One was called Feng Yuliang, and the other was called Grandma Fenghua. She was an old woman, and she held an 8-foot-long withered wooden staff. Different from Yuan Shijin, Feng Yuliang and Grandma Fenghua were not exile cultivators. They came to 13 Spectre to earn points and make money. Yuan Shijin was not at ease with Wu Gui. If he came to the appointment and was tricked by Wu Gui, then he would be an idiot. Therefore, Yuan Shijin promised Feng Yuliang and Grandma Fenghua that if they came to help today, he would give them a quarter of the Nether Lotus throne. How could the Yuanian cultivators not know about the use of this thing? Feng Yuliang and Grandma Fenghua naturally agreed. Yuan Shijin took out the Frost Soul Origin Crystal and showed it to the great-granduncle. After confirming that the other party did not go back on their words, they nodded slightly. The great-granduncle looked at the two Yuanian cultivators standing behind Yuan Shijin and shook his head. Yuan Shijin, you only brought two people? The great-granduncle raised his hand and clapped. Clap, clap. Dark clouds suddenly gathered in the sky, and black sand danced on the ground in the distance. Several rays of light flashed in the void. A group of King of Kukui riding Balrog crocodiles rushed over. There were at least 40 to 50 of them. In the sky, the rotting dragon riding the Rakshas Estate's unique king warrior looked down fiercely. The few rays of light in the void were 3 soul catcher ghost kings. The soul catcher ghost kings had almost complete dark bodies. They were like steel puppets, and their skin was as rough as sandpaper. The strength of these 3 soul catcher ghost kings was close to that of Wu Gui. As long as they devoured some souls, they would quickly evolve into Wu Gui. Behind the soul catcher ghost kings was a large group of dark ghosts. In front of the soul catcher ghost kings, these dark ghosts were as docile as little white rabbits. Without the soul catcher ghost king's orders, they did not even dare to breathe loudly. The great-granduncle came prepared. Chapter 443. Li Daocheng's journey was truly exciting. Something happened almost everywhere he went. 13 Spectre was much more lively than he had imagined. Li Daocheng still hadn't found out how cruel 13 Spectre was. At least, he hadn't encountered anything that could threaten Li Daocheng. Even that great-granduncle couldn't threaten Li Daocheng. Li Daocheng had been able to make the intercourse flee when he was in the middle stage of Jindan, let alone now, that he was in the late stage of Jindan. The Eye of Lightning punishment at full power was enough to turn a Wu Gui into charcoal. Song Ink had been repaired and upgraded. With a mysterious spirit treasure, he could kill a group of dark ghosts with one slash. He also had 4 level 12 talismans. With so many trump cards in hand, he could even put up a fight against the most powerful Wu Gui. With so many reinforcements from Dark Ghost's side, the momentum of the 3 human cultivators immediately weakened. Yuan Shijin's expression was gloomy at first, but when all the dark ghosts arrived, he revealed a smile. Great-granduncle, you're so considerate. Did you call so many comrades just to see you get beaten up? Yuan Shijin, what else can you do besides shout? 13 Spectre isn't owned by you human cultivators anymore. My Rakshas estate is full of warriors. We can send out tens of thousands of troops to crush you at any time. Can you still mobilize so many troops at this juncture? Great-granduncle pointed behind him. Great-granduncle, you think too highly of yourself. Today, I'll let you know if we can still mobilize troops. Yuan Shijin chuckled. Clap, clap. He clapped his hands twice, just like great-granduncle. As soon as he finished speaking, light shone in the distance. The cultivators hidden in a barrier immediately flew over. There were hundreds of them. When Li Daochong saw this group of cultivators, he was surprised. Most of them were wearing the same robes as North Star University. They were the new students who came with Li Daochong on the space shuttle. However, there were other cultivators mixed in. Li Daochong immediately saw Su Wanqing in the crowd. Li Daochong rubbed his chin. Wasn't she the first batch of North Star University students to be transported to 13 Spectre? Why was she here? He didn't have a deep impression of Su Wanqing. He only knew that she was a famous person on North Star University's star roll. The smile on great-granduncle's face froze when he saw so many cultivators. He had not expected that Yuan Shijin could recruit so many cultivators. Now, the two sides were once again balanced. Yuan Shijin extended his hand. Great-granduncle, after you. A cold smile appeared on great-granduncle's ferocious face. His aura surged out like a tide, causing the ground to tremble slightly. The great-granduncle says the earth, the earth, Li Daochong's expression changed. This great-granduncle was much more powerful than the intercourse. He was at least on par with Yuanying. Yuan Shijin casually tossed out a long sword in his hand. The sword radiance shot toward Grand Uncle like lightning. Ha! Great-granduncle stretched out 2 fingers and easily caught the longsword. Yuan Shijin, you better show me what you're capable of. If this is just a small fight, you might not even have the chance to use your ultimate move. Yuan Shijin was shocked. This flying sword wasn't very powerful, but it was still a flying sword attack. Great-granduncle could easily catch it with 2 fingers. This was a blatant show-off and a threat. Yuan Shijin wasn't good at using flying swords. It was just a weapon that he carried around with him. It was usually used as a decoration. Yuan Shijin's real weapon was his soul-suppressing lamp. However, it wasn't very nice to look at. He usually didn't hold it in his hand and would sleep in his storage ring. Yuan Shijin waved his hand, and an oil lamp about 7 inches tall and 3 inches wide appeared in his hand. The oil lamp was bright, but it wasn't yellow. Instead, it was blue. Great-granduncle, since you're in such a hurry, I won't waste your time. Soul-suppressing demon, subduing flame. Yuan Shijin threw the soul-suppressing lamp in his hand. The soul-suppressing lamp was in the air. The flame wasn't affected by the wind speed at all. With a buzzing sound, a raging fire rose to the sky. The flame burned toward great-granduncle like a tide. Child's play. Great-granduncle looked disdainful. Do you think the spiritual yang true fire is invincible? It's still useful against dark ghosts below the level of soul-catcher ghosts. However, your soul-suppressing demon subduing flame is too weak against me. It doesn't have any heat or yang energy. It can't even hurt my skin. Great-granduncle didn't just say that. He really did it. He didn't even try to dodge the flame. The huge flame, with a diameter of more than 3 meters, burned great-granduncle for a full 3 minutes. Yuan Shijin only stopped when he felt a little tired. When the flame died down, great-granduncle stood there unscathed. Yuan Shijin, you've attacked twice. It's my turn now. Great-granduncle opened his mouth and spat out a ball of black flame. Dark fire. If you use the spiritual yang true fire, I'll use the dark fire. Courtesy demands reciprocity. No one owes anyone anything. Yuan Shijin's eyes were filled with horror, but he didn't show it on his face. His best move couldn't even hurt the other party. It was like a slap in the face. Yuan Shijin was a little confused. He had fought great-granduncle a month ago. They were evenly matched, and Yuan Shijin had a slight advantage. If great-granduncle's mount, the Balrog Crocodile Emperor, hadn't appeared, Yuan Shijin would have captured great-granduncle alive a month ago. It had only been a month, but Yuan Shijin felt completely different when they fought again. Yuan Shijin had also used the soul-suppressing lamp a month ago. At that time, great-granduncle was running around and didn't dare to take it head-on. Now, he couldn't even move. The soul-suppressing demon subduing flame was one of the top 10 spiritual yang true fires. Although it was only ranked 10th, it was still one of the top 10. Looking at the dark fire rushing toward him, Yuan Shijin waved his sleeve and a black shield appeared in front of him. Bang! The moment the dark fire touched the shield, it exploded like adding oil to the fire. The black shield melted from the flames. Yuan Shijin retreated dozens of meters in a sorry state, and there were even a few holes in his Dharma robe. Mighty, the dark ghost behind great-granduncle let out a mighty voice. His aura was like a rainbow, and his eardrums were shattered. The human cultivators were silent at this time. Although they didn't show any weakness, they were a little uncertain. Anyone with eyes could tell that Yuan Shijin was a little overwhelmed and wasn't a match for great-granduncle. Great-granduncle didn't rush to attack again. Instead, he waited for Yuan Shijin to be ready before launching a second attack. In the eyes of the onlookers, the battle between a Yuan-level cultivator and Wu Gui wasn't very powerful. The moves they used didn't have the power to destroy heaven and earth, and the range of their attacks wasn't very wide. But it was wrong to think that way. It didn't seem very powerful because the target of the attack had suppressed the destructive power to the minimum. If the same move was used against a weak cultivator, the power would increase exponentially. Take Yuan Shijin's soul-subduing demon fire, for example. The 3-meter-wide flame tongue kept burning great-granduncle's body. If it was another person with a weak cultivation, the flame tongue might reach 10 meters in diameter. It would burn back and forth like a meteor falling to the ground, raising mountains and rivers to the ground and burning the sea into a dry pit. Back to the main point. When great-granduncle launched his second attack, Yuan Shijin didn't even see it clearly before the former appeared in front of him. Although Yuan Shijin didn't see it clearly, he didn't panic. His Dharma robe changed into Dharma armor. A short sword about 10 inches long appeared in Yuan Shijin's hand. He wasn't afraid of close combat. Great-granduncle punched Yuan Shijin's Dharma armor. Clang! There was a sound like metal colliding. Yuan Shijin didn't feel the slightest discomfort and stabbed the sword at great-granduncle's waist. Bang! Great-granduncle's big hand with sharp black nails grabbed the short sword. The sharp short sword couldn't even cut through great-granduncle's skin. Great-granduncle fiercely grabbed the short sword and stabbed it into Yuan Shijin's chest. Clang! There was another crisp sound. The Dharma armor on Yuan Shijin's body was far harder than expected. Great-granduncle's 2 attacks didn't succeed. He was a bit annoyed and was about to grab Yuan Shijin's neck when the latter suddenly flew back. The soul-subduing lamp suddenly fell from the sky and became incomparably huge. Boom! With a loud sound, great-granduncle was pressed down by the soul-subduing lamp and disappeared. Yuan Shijin sneered. Humph! Let's see how arrogant you can be this time. Suppressed by my soul-subduing lamp. You'll never be able to come out unless I release you. After that, Yuan Shijin looked at the girl sitting on the head of the Balrog Emperor and said, Little girl, quickly give me that nether lotus throne. The girl rested her chin on her hand and looked at Yuan Shijin with a bored face. She yawned and said with tears in her eyes, The winner hasn't been decided yet. Why should I give it to you? Why don't you give me the cold soul source crystal? Yuan Shijin was angry. Why hasn't the winner been decided yet? Isn't it obvious? Great-granduncle has been suppressed by me. Do I have to kill him? The girl waved her hand. You can't kill him. Even if I fight him, it will take me a long time to subdue him. You're still far from it. Yuan Shijin was anxious and was about to fly over to snatch the nether lotus throne from the girl's hand when there was a loud sound. Dong! The soul-subduing lamp shook. Dong! There was another sound. The soul-subduing lamp shook even more, and the sound became more and more urgent. The soul-subduing lamp was like a small boat in the wind. Boom! With a loud sound, the soul-subduing lamp fell down. Great-granduncle swaggered out from under the lamp. Bang! Before Yuan Shijin could react, he was punched in the face. He suddenly felt dizzy and was a little dazed. A cruel smile appeared on great-granduncle's face. He grabbed Yuan Shijin's head. For some reason, the latter's body was like a statue. The Yuaning inside his body was trembling and could not use any power. Great-granduncle held Yuan Shijin in his hand like a chicken. His black nails were like nails that were digging into Yuan Shijin's head bit by bit. Seeing that Yuan Shijin was about to die on the spot, Grandma Fenghua shouted, "Stop!" Great-granduncle looked at Grandma Fenghua mockingly. Old woman, if you can't stand it, you can attack me. It's not against the rules. Ha ha. Grandma Fenghua was angry. She was about to attack, but was stopped by Feng Yuliang. Fellow Taoist Feng, don't be impulsive. I feel that something is wrong. Brother Yuan wouldn't be tricked by Wu Gui, right? Feng Yuliang's voice was very low, but it was still heard by great-granduncle. Ha ha ha. Surname Feng, you're really smart. When I fought Yuan Shijin a month ago, I deliberately pretended to be weak in order to lure this fellow into a gambling match with me. He's been looking for the Netherworld Lotus Throne for quite some time now. Everyone knows that I can easily trick this brainless fellow into a gambling match with me. Gambling match? Ha ha! Are you human cultivators stupid? Bet with us, ghosts. Won't you lose without a doubt? I'm sure that Yuan Shijin won't come alone. He will definitely ask for help. He might even call for the cultivator army to help. We only have one goal, and that is to eliminate all the human cultivators on 13 Spectre. No matter what method we use, as long as we can eliminate you all. Bet? What is that? Ha ha. Great-granduncle laughed out loud. At this time, Yuan Shijin, who had lost his resistance, was full of regret. He had heard great-granduncle's words. It was all his fault for being greedy and dragging so many cultivators down with him. I'll fight you to the death. Yuan Shijin suddenly roared and directly detonated Yuaning. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion. A mushroom cloud with a diameter of more than 500 meters soared into the sky. The shock wave covered dozens of kilometers. Everything within a radius of more than 10 kilometers was enveloped by the shocking explosion. Everything standing upright was smashed into pieces. The spectators on both sides were 2 kilometers away. It didn't get too close. After all, it was a battle between Yuanian cultivators. Getting too close was courting death. Even though they were 2 kilometers away, some people on both sides were still affected. Although they weren't killed, they were still injured. The power of a late-stage Yuanian cultivator self-detonation was really shocking. This was after being suppressed by great-granduncle. Yuanian was already injured. When the explosion happened, it was weakened by great-granduncle Wu Gui's dead soul. Otherwise, it would be even more powerful. It could at least trigger a mushroom cloud of more than 2 kilometers and raise an area of more than 100 kilometers to the ground. It left a bottomless pit more than 1 kilometer wide. Great-granduncle drilled out of the ground with a dusty face. At that moment, he directly used the blood sacrifice earth escape and drilled hundreds of meters underground. Only some of his skin was injured by the explosion, but he was still frightened. Chapter 444. Li Daochong crawled out of the rubble with a frightened look on his face. Damn it, that was close. How could it explode just like that without calling out loudly? If not for Li Daocheng's quick reaction and drilling into the ground, he would have been crippled by the explosion. The power was really too great. The human cultivators thought that Yuan Shijin and Wu Gui, great-granduncle, had perished together. However, when they saw great-granduncle appear in front of them unscathed, they were all dumbfounded. Even the most powerful Yuan Shijin had no power to resist, let alone them. In a high-level battle, having a large number of people was useless because the difference in power was too great. It was the same logic as how a million ants were no match for a single person. They could casually step on you, pour boiling water on you, and kill you however they wanted. Great-granduncle flew in front of the human cultivators and said with a sinister smile, "Since you've come today, don't leave. I've been hungry for many days. You'll become our most delicious dinner." Great-granduncle's laughter carried a strong sound wave attack, shaking the eardrums of all the cultivators. Apart from Fang Yuliang and Grandma Fenghua, who could withstand it, almost everyone else couldn't. Only a few youngsters in the crowd could barely withstand it. Su Wanqing was one of them. In fact, the sound wave attack great-granduncle deliberately released had no effect on her at all. Jean Dan's peak cultivation was not an ordinary Jean Dan's peak cultivation, so Su Wanqing naturally had her own pride. This laughter had already made 90% of the cultivators lose their fighting strength, falling on the ground and unable to get up. Human cultivators, they're just delicious food. Great-granduncle grabbed a cultivator, opened his mouth, and sucked his soul into his stomach. Great-granduncle showed an expression of extreme enjoyment. "This taste is still the most delicious." Saying that, great-granduncle grabbed another cultivator, preparing to continue enjoying the delicious food. As for the other human cultivators who were still standing, he didn't care about them at all, nor did he worry about them escaping. Could they escape? The answer was naturally no. Just as great-granduncle was about to suck out the human cultivator's soul in his hand, a delicate shout was heard. "Stop!" Su Wanqing jumped out of the crowd, the two silver swords in her hands slashing towards great-granduncle with two dazzling lights. "Interesting," great-granduncle said with a smile and raised his hand. A crisp sound rang out. Su Wanqing only felt her wrist go numb, but she was not afraid at all. She muttered something and a bolt of lightning shot out. Boom! It hit great-granduncle right in the head. Black smoke rose from its two curved horns, and its face was char-black. Its mouth opened and emitted a wisp of black smoke. "Ha-ha!" A burst of bell-like laughter came from behind. The girl sitting on the head of the Balrog crocodile laughed out loud. Great-granduncle opened his eyes that had been closed for an instant and waited for Su Wanqing. "Little girl, you scare me to death just now. As a reward, I will eat you. Not only will I eat your soul, but I will also eat your body." As he spoke, great-granduncle suddenly took 2 steps forward and arrived in front of Su Wanqing. He reached out to grab her, but he grabbed nothing but air. Great-granduncle looked surprised. Su Wanqing actually dodged. In terms of movement technique, she was actually much better than Yuan Ying's late-stage Yuan Shijin. Her speed was also faster, and her body was lithe. Great-granduncle failed to grab Su Wanqing several times and became angry. He also used his maximum power to grab Su Wanqing, but he still couldn't catch her. Granny Fenghua said in surprise, "How old is this girl? She has actually comprehended one of the most mysterious martial arts of Beijing University, ethereal steps, so thoroughly." Fang Yuliang also nodded. "Grandma Fenghua, let's make a move. We can't let such a talent die." Grandma Fenghua nodded. The 2 Yuanian cultivators were just about to make a move when they heard the girl behind them shout, "Great-granduncle, don't kill her. Keep her. I want her to be my human pet or maid. This woman's cultivation is quite interesting," the girl said with a somewhat commanding tone. Great-granduncle was not happy, but he finally replied, "Understood, Your Highness. I will definitely capture her alive and send her to you. Hurry up. I can't wait to play with this woman's cultivation. Her steps are so agile. If I let her carry me on her back every day, I won't need other mounts, haha." The girl said excitedly and kept clapping her hands. When Su Wanqing heard the girl's words, her lungs were about to explode. The human cultivators who heard this were furious. The words of the witchcraft girl were too arrogant, too condescending. She wanted to use people as mounts. But great-granduncle was too powerful. All of Su Wanqing's attacks were ineffective against him. Grandma Fenghua and Feng Yuliang also joined in. The two Yuaning intermediate stage cultivators used all their strength but still couldn't do anything to great-granduncle. Great-granduncle had been teasing the three of them. He seized the opportunity and punched Feng Yuliang, seriously injuring him. Grandma Fenghua narrowly avoided the first punch, but she couldn't avoid the second punch. After being hit, she couldn't get up. The Yuaning intermediate stage cultivators couldn't withstand a single blow from great-granduncle. In the end, only Su Wanqing was left. Great-granduncle easily reached out and caught Su Wanqing. "Weren't you very slippery a moment ago? You will eventually get tired. Now you can run again," great-granduncle said while holding Su Wanqing as if teasing a toy. Su Wanqing clenched her teeth and stabbed her sword into great-granduncle's open mouth. Crack! Great-granduncle directly bit the sword into two halves. Despair appeared on Su Wanqing's cold face. The witchcraft girl was too powerful. It was far beyond the scope of her understanding. The hundreds of cultivators who fell behind were also in despair. They were all going to die today. Moreover, they were going to be eaten. No one was willing to die like this. But they were too weak. There was nothing they could do. Put her down, and you can leave alive. Just when everyone thought that the same day next year would be the anniversary of their deaths, a clear voice came from the side. Everyone raised their heads to look. They saw a youth who looked no more than 18 or 19 years old, wearing a blue martial robe, walk out of the pile of rubble. Great-granduncle looked at the human cultivator youth, as if he was looking an idiot. He wondered how such a brainless person could say such a brainless thing in the world. Put her down, and you can leave alive? Just based on a brat like you? I'll swallow you in one gulp. Great-granduncle suppressed the displeasure in his heart and looked indifferently at the approaching youth. This youth was none other than Li Daocheng, who had been hiding on the side. Seeing great-granduncle start to swallow the human soul, Li Daocheng could no longer hide. Li Daocheng approached great-granduncle step by step. 15 meters, 10 meters, 5 meters. He was still getting closer. Su Wanqing said anxiously, "Li Daocheng, don't get any closer. No matter how powerful you are, you're definitely not a match for the witchcraft girls. Their physical bodies are too strong." Li Daocheng seemed to not hear her and continued to walk forward step by step. 4 meters, 3 meters, 2 meters. When he was 2 meters away, great-granduncle smiled. His smile was very bright. At this moment, he was very sure that he had met an idiot, and a big idiot with water in his head. He actually dared to come within 2 meters of him. Wasn't he just delivering food to him? Great-granduncle reached out to grab Li Daocheng. Slap! His claw went down, but he didn't catch the person. Instead, a hand grabbed his wrist in midair. Huh! Great-granduncle was surprised. The girl in the distance was also surprised. Great-granduncle wanted to break free from Li Daocheng's grip on his wrist, but when he tried to exert force, he couldn't move it at all. Great-granduncle was puzzled. He didn't understand what was going on. Li Daocheng said indifferently, "I said let her go, and you can leave alive because I'm in a good mood today and don't want to kill. Oh, right, you can all leave, but that girl can't. Let her be my maid. I just happen to be lacking a maid." As soon as Li Daocheng said that, the girl in the distance was furious. She pointed at Li Daocheng and ordered great-granduncle, "Kill him for me." Great-granduncle also wanted to, but he couldn't move at all. Great-granduncle let go of Su Wanqing and threw a punch at Li Daocheng's face. Bang! With a muffled sound, great-granduncle was sent flying. Li Daocheng stomped on the ground and jumped up high. He stepped on great-granduncle's chest and sneered, "Since you're courting death, don't blame me." Bang! Li Daocheng lifted his leg and kicked great-granduncle several hundred meters away. Great-granduncle was completely enraged. A puny human cultivator could actually trample on him like this. It was unforgivable. The girl was also furious. She jumped off the Balrog Emperor's head and shot toward Li Daochong without caring about anything else. The girl kicked Li Daochong. Li Daochong had no intention of dodging. He grabbed the girl's ankle and pulled heavily, smashing her to the ground. There was a loud boom. A human-shaped hole appeared on the ground. The girl felt her chi and blood churning. She couldn't breathe. She looked at Li Daochong in shock. What was this human cultivator? His aura wasn't very strong. Why couldn't she beat him? Great-granduncle got up with great difficulty and rushed over to help the girl. However, just as he moved, a blue light flashed in the boy's eyes. Boom! 2 bolts of lightning shot out from his eyes. Chapter 445. The speed of lightning was the nightmare of all creatures below the tribulation level because they couldn't be dodged. At the same time, it contained the most explosive energy in the world, which was the anger of the laws. It was impressive to be able to reach the speed of sound in the Qi gathering stage, 3 times the speed of sound in the foundation establishment stage, and 10 times the speed of sound in the Jin dance stage. Only the top masters could reach that speed in the above 3 stages. Of course, the Yuanying stage was faster. Under normal circumstances, he could reach 20 times the speed of sound, and the top masters could reach 30 times the speed of sound. But even so, the speed of lightning was still far away. Even if he used some secret escape techniques, he couldn't reach the speed of light and couldn't last long. What was the speed of the soul formation stage? Sorry, it was far from it. A peak soul formation stage cultivator could reach 200 times the speed of sound. The speed of lightning was 890,000 times the speed of sound. Dodge? That was impossible, unless you could predict the direction of the lightning and dodge it in advance. That was also under the condition that you were quite fast. After all, it took time to react. So below the tribulation level, dodge the lightning strikes. 2 words. Impossible. Lightning shot out of Li Daochong's eyes. It was very sudden. After Li Daochong reached the late stage of the Jin dance stage, his cultivation was even more profound. It didn't take too much time to release the Eyes of Thunder punishment. If it wasn't released at full power, he could retract and release it freely. Great Uncle didn't have time to react at all. 2 bolts of lightning struck him. The Wu Ghost's nether body was very strong, comparable to the demon's barbarian body. But in front of the spiritual Yang Thunder, it was like a piece of paper. The Yang Thunder could increase the damage to the netherworld. Boom! There was a shocking sound of thunder. Great Uncle was blown away. His chest was penetrated, and there were 2 bowl-sized bloody holes. Sheng Li Nuo, silk, and chaff paper? Poof! Great Uncle spat out a mouthful of black blood and looked at Li Daochong in disbelief. You're a thunder combat cultivator. Great Uncle spat out a few words with difficulty. Bang! What answered him was a giant foot from the sky. Li Daochong leaped up and landed heavily on Great-Granduncle's chest, looking down at the witch ghost who had just swallowed the soul of a human cultivator. Bang! Li Daochong's face was devoid of any emotion. He was as indifferent as water, but he punched Grand Uncle's face from above. Bang, bang, bang. 1 punch, another punch. He didn't move too fast. He just punched out 1 punch after another. Each punch didn't seem to be powerful, but made a dull sound when it hit Grand Uncle's face. Stop! The girl roared. Li Daochong didn't hear her. His hands didn't stop, and he didn't even look at the girl. He only said, I said that I can spare your lives. Unfortunately, you didn't listen, so don't blame me. Li Daochong's voice was neither happy nor sad. His dark eyes looked at Great-Granduncle, whose face was badly mutilated, with a trace of imperceptible anger. Do you eat people? Then I'll eat you. I'm going to kill you. The girl's red eyes were burning with raging flames. She stretched out her hand, and a black chain appeared in her hand. Without any explanation, she lashed it at Li Daochong fiercely. Soul-capturing chain. High-grade witch treasure. This treasure was one of the most famous witch treasures in the Hades. Together with the Morning Stick, the Soul-devouring spear, and the Soul-summoning banner, they were the 4 most classic grand wizard treasures in the Hades. It wasn't something an ordinary witch ghost could have. With these 4 witch treasures, it would be much easier to swallow human souls. If an ordinary human was touched by the witch treasure, their soul would be absorbed and sealed. When a master wanted to enjoy it, he could take some of it to eat at any time. This whip contained the dark art, and the chain was surrounded by a strange black gas. At this moment, Su Wanqing, who was watching Li Daochong ravaging great-granduncle with her mouth wide open in shock, finally came to her senses. She cried out involuntarily, "Be careful." However, Li Daochong didn't seem to hear him at all. He continued to bombard great-granduncle with his fists and kept talking. "Who told you to eat people? Who told you to eat people?" "Ha!" Li Daochong's other hand suddenly reached out and grabbed the soul-capturing chain that was whipping towards him. "Don't touch that chain." Su Wanqing cried out in alarm. But it was too late. Li Daochong had already caught the chain. The soul-capturing chain was like a snake that quickly wrapped around Li Daochong's arm and coiled around it a few times. Su Wanqing rushed up and slashed at the soul-capturing chain, trying to help Li Daochong out of the predicament. But her sword hit the chain. Su Wanqing only felt her hand go numb. A black gas quickly wrapped around the sword and crawled into her palm. Su Wanqing reflexively threw the sword away. Crack! The mystical spirit treasure grade flying sword was quickly dyed black. Then it cracked little by little. In a short while, the sword was full of cracks and turned into a pile of scrap metal. The soul-capturing chain lived up to its name. This kind of high-grade witch treasure was far above mystical spirit treasures. It was comparable to mystical spirit treasures. When Su Wanqing's flying sword collided with it, it was immediately corroded and lost its spirituality. This scene made Su Wanqing even more anxious. Even a mystical spirit treasure could not withstand it, not to mention a physical body. Even if she had a spiritual body after being reborn, she would not be able to withstand such overbearing death qi. Su Wanqing looked at Li Daochong disheartenedly. She was afraid that this kid had already been contaminated by the death qi. His spiritual body was starting to weaken, and his whole body had turned black. But when Su Wanqing saw Li Daochong, her little mouth opened wide. Li Daochong did not turn black. His arm that was wrapped around the soul-capturing chain did not change at all. Instead, he grabbed the chain and pulled with all his might. That girl was like a kite with a broken string. She was pulled in front of Li Daochong in an instant. Li Daochong turned to look at the girl and grinned. "This chain is a little interesting. It actually made my arm tingle a little." Li Daochong looked like he was talking and laughing with an old friend. But his arm that was bound by the chain stretched out, and his big hand tightly clasped the girl's neck. With a light lift, the Ghoul girl was lifted into the air like a little chick. Her 2 little legs under her skirt struggled helplessly. Su Wanqing was petrified. This Li Daochong, what was going on? Was he a Yuanian cultivator? That's not right. Even a late-stage Yuanian cultivator was not a match for him. He clearly did not have the aura of a Yuanian cultivator. He was clearly a Jindan cultivator. While Su Wanqing was shocked, she suddenly saw a golden light flash out of Li Daochong's body. Hiss! Su Wanqing sucked in a breath of cold air. Sun Jindan. Su Wanqing's worldview was completely overturned at this moment. She, who had always been high and mighty, felt a sense of powerlessness. Her talent was heaven-defying, and she was a proud daughter of heaven in the entire Federation. But she had only condensed a Jindan. She was still very far away from the Sun Jindan. Let go of her highness. Grand Uncle let out a low roar, and a black light flashed out of his body. A black pill-like object the size of an egg floated out. This was the witch core that only a ghoul possessed. This thing was refined bit by bit when he was still a ghost. After condensing a ghost body, the ghost body would slowly condense and eventually become a ghost core. After evolving into a ghoul, the ghost core would be upgraded to a witch core. Seeing this scene, the girl said in shock, "No." Grand Uncle revealed a cruel smile. "Her Highness, this person's cultivation is too powerful. If we let him grow, it's worth it to use my cheap life to exchange for his." After saying this, a dark red flame flashed in Grand Uncle's eyes. The witch core shot towards Li Daocheng's dantian like a huge bullet. Perish together? In your dreams. When Li Daocheng spoke, the blue lightning in his eyes had already exploded. The piercing blue light blinded the girl who was facing Li Daocheng. She couldn't see anything. Boom! 2 bolts of lightning struck the witch core that shot towards him. Grand Uncle opened his empty ghost eyes and sighed unwillingly. After the witch core was struck by the spiritual yang lightning, it couldn't even self-destruct. Grand Uncle didn't intend to self-destruct the witch core. He just wanted to plant the witch core into this terrifying human cultivator's body. Even if he couldn't kill him, he would have no hope of advancing his cultivation in this lifetime. However, Grand Uncle didn't expect that he had still underestimated the strength of this human cultivator who looked so young that he shouldn't have such terrifying strength. Using the witch core was the same as Yuanying's self-destruction of Yuanying. When the witch core exploded, Yuanying only scraped off some of Grand Uncle's flesh. However, when the latter used the witch core, it didn't even hurt a hair on the young human cultivator's body. Grand Uncle didn't have time to feel anything else. After the witch core was destroyed, his witch body quickly withered and turned into black dust that dissipated into the void. A gust of wind blew past. Li Daocheng didn't have anything under his feet. Beep! Killed 1 Wuguei, Grand Uncle. Soul power obtained. Converted into spirit qi. Li Daocheng felt the spirit qi in his body increase significantly. The Sun Jin Dan grew a little bigger. He felt an indescribable comfort all over his body. The increased strength made him feel so comfortable that he couldn't help but want to punch the ground 10,000 times to vent. The girl glared at Li Daocheng. Human cultivator, I want to eat your flesh, drink your blood, peel your skin, grind your bones, and refine your human soul into a bound spirit. I'll fry it in a pot of oil for 10,000 years. Li Daocheng didn't exert any force on the girl's hand. He listened to the girl's curses and enjoyed her crazy expression. After she finished speaking, he said faintly, "What a complicated process. However, you won't have that chance." When Li Daocheng appeared, he saw that the Wuguei girl was extremely arrogant. In her eyes, humans were not much different from livestock. She actually wanted to raise a female cultivator as a pet and even wanted to use her as a mount. When he heard the girl say those words, Li Daocheng, as a human, was really annoyed. If you want to use humans as pets and mounts, I'll use you as a servant girl and a slave. This was Li Daocheng's thought at that time. However, Li Daocheng changed his mind now. At that moment, it was just a vile thought of revenge. Why do I need you as a servant girl? Swallowing you is the right path. Li Daocheng exerted force, and the girl's pale face immediately turned purple. Wuguei didn't need to breathe. The girl's face was just the reverse flow of hell blood provided by her witchcraft core. This was a state that appeared when one was on the verge of death. The underworld ghost army behind them was restless. The rotting dragons in the air flew up and down, and the Balrog crocodiles on the ground roared. The 3 soul-devouring ghost kings wanted to charge, but didn't dare. Li Daocheng, don't kill her. Su Wanqing suddenly said. Li Daocheng turned his head. Give me a reason. Su Wanqing immediately said, this girl probably has a high status in Rakshasa state. She's very likely a princess. Otherwise, the underworld ghost army wouldn't be so restless. They want to charge but don't dare, as if they're afraid of angering you. Li Daocheng glanced at the restless underworld ghost army, then at the girl in his hand. So what if she's a princess? Su Wanqing pursed her lips and said, the demon-subduing city is in danger. During this period of time, the Rakshasa country has captured a lot of nascent soul stage cultivators. We can exchange them with her. If her position is higher than expected, her value will be even higher. We can even make the Rakshasa country withdraw from the demon-subduing city. Li Daocheng loosened his grip. He had just arrived at 13 Spectre not long ago, so he didn't know much about the situation here. Su Wanqing's words made sense. The girl felt the release on her neck, but she heard Su Wanqing's words. An imperceptible trace of regret flashed across her eyes. The girl struggled with all her might once again. A pair of white hands with sharp black nails scratched Li Daocheng's arm. "Kill me. Why don't you kill me? Kill me quickly. If you want me to kill you, I won't kill you. From now on, you're my maid. Do you hear me?" Li Daocheng said indifferently. He loosened his grip, and the girl fell to the ground. In that instant, the girl used the soul detention chains to attack Li Daocheng again. She also took out a black bead and threw it at Li Daocheng. Chapter 446. The soul restraining chains were useless against Li Daocheng, and the black bead that was supposed to explode was suspended 2 meters in front of Li Daocheng. The black bead spun fiercely, as if resisting some invisible force. It wanted to charge forward, but also wanted to explode. But that invisible force kept the black bead in the air. Li Daocheng stretched out his hand and flicked his finger. The black bead flew back towards the dark ghost army behind him. Boom! More than 10 Balrog crocodile knights were blown to smithereens. Beep! Killed 15 Balrog crocodiles. 13 king of Kukui. Obtained soul power converted to spirit energy. The distant and empty voice of the hot-blooded upgrader sounded. Wisps of dark green mist silently entered Li Daocheng's body. Apart from Li Daocheng, no one else could see this dark green mist. In an instant, the spirit energy in Li Daocheng's body swelled up like a balloon. The Sun Jin Dan also grew a little. However, Li Daocheng's realm did not increase. He was still at the late stage of the Jin Dan, but his spirit energy had clearly increased. His spiritual sense had also grown a little. The baby-shaped reflection in the Sun Jin Dan stabilized and no longer flickered. Li Daocheng's body trembled slightly. He didn't know if it was because he had converted too much spirit energy at once, or because he was angry after seeing the witch ghost eat people. Li Daocheng felt as if the blood in his body was boiling. His hands trembled slightly. This was an uncontrollable impulse after entering a frenzied state. Was this why the hot-blooded upgrader was called the hot-blooded upgrader? Li Daocheng's heartbeat sped up, his desire for battle rising steadily. At this moment, the girl stood in place, stunned. That black bead was a life-saving trump card her father had given her. It required 3 years to refine. It was similar to a high-grade talisman for human cultivators, and its power was about the same. However, the black orb triggered the law of death. In the Hades, it was known as the witchcraft orb. The witchcraft orb that the girl had sent out was a level 13 witchcraft orb made by a very powerful sorcerer in Rakshasa state. It was equivalent to a level 13 talisman in the spirit realm. To be able to kill off a cultivator from the Yuaniing plane, even a peak-level great cultivator from the Yuaniing plane would have to retreat. If struck, even if they did not die, they would be crippled. The girl was dumbfounded. A level 13 sorcerer orb had no effect on this young man. How is this possible? The girl instantly lost her ability to think. She knew very well how powerful the sorcerer beads were. Just half a month ago, she saw with her own eyes how her father used 3 level 13 sorcerer beads to kill 2 of the dozen Yuaniing cultivators who had besieged him. That was a Yuaniing cultivator. Jin Dan was stronger than Yuaniing? The girl's worldview was collapsing. This was completely different from what she knew. In fact, if a level 13 sorcerer orb really exploded, Li Daocheng would definitely not be able to withstand it. It was even possible that he would be killed by the explosion. However, Li Daocheng's divine sense was extremely condensed and dense. Every time he leveled up, it would increase greatly. Li Daocheng's strongest point had never been his cultivation or combat strength. The strength of his telekinesis was his strongest trump card. From the beginning until now, this had never changed. The telekinesis technique and the hot-blooded upgrader had extremely terrifying enhancements to his divine sense. Li Daocheng did not need to cultivate at all. His divine sense was growing every moment. Although his cultivation was only at the late stage of Jin Dan, his divine sense was comparable to a late stage or even peak-level great cultivator from the Yuaniing plane. In terms of sensitivity and thickness, it was even better. It was only slightly weaker than a divine transformation realm cultivator. With such a powerful divine sense, he could condense it into a substance within a small area and create his own divine sense field. Within this area, Li Daochong was omnipotent. Of course, this was a bit of an exaggeration. At present, he was far from reaching that level. However, within this divine sense field, Li Daochong could indeed kill, save, defend, and attack with a single thought. In this field, he could do whatever he wanted. Everything could be done with a single thought. The divine sense field was the signature ability of a divine transformation realm cultivator. At present, Li Daochong's divine sense field only had a radius of 5 meters and was not dense enough. However, it was still enough to imprison a level 13 sorcerer orb for a short period of time. This ability would naturally be produced when one's divine sense reached a certain level. It was just like when one's strength was strong enough, one would naturally be able to lift heavy objects. It was something that would happen naturally. The underworld ghost army was scattered by the sorcerer orb's explosion. The rotting dragons and Balrog crocodiles became more and more agitated. Sitting on their backs, Wang Sha's soldiers and the king of Kukui were somewhat unable to control this group of agitated ghost beasts. The black chi around the 3 soul-devouring ghost kings became denser and denser. They were enraged. However, these underworld ghosts still maintained their restraint. It was as if some kind of terrifying power was suppressing their desire to eat humans. Not far away, the human cultivators lying on the ground on the verge of death were a delicious meal in their eyes. After looking at them for so long, they still could not eat them. How could these underworld ghosts not be agitated? It was as if you had been hungry for an entire day and a table of delicious food was placed in front of you, but you could not enjoy it. This kind of torment would cause anyone to feel an intense sense of anxiety. The longer you endured it, the more violent it would be when it exploded. However, without receiving an order, they did not dare to move. This was because the sorcerer orb was in existence above them. In the Hades, there was a strict hierarchy. High-level underworld ghosts had absolute authority and deterrence. This was the complete opposite of the human race, who emphasized democracy after the Great Cultivation era. The beings of the Hades would never dare to challenge the authority of their superiors, because that would mean death, or even worse, a fate worse than death. Great-granduncle was a sorcerer orb, and that girl was also a sorcerer orb. Great-granduncle was dead, but the girl was not. The underworld ghost army would never dare to defy the girl's will, even if the sorcerer orb was beaten to a pulp by that human cultivator. These underworld ghosts and ghost beasts still harbored a deep fear of the girl. This was because the high-level sorcerer orb could instantly annihilate their dead souls, turning them into death chi that would dissipate into space and become a part of the death chi laws. Your Highness, do you need us to act? A soul-devouring ghost king finally couldn't help but ask. Only then did the dazed girl come to her senses. Gritting her teeth, she pointed at Li Daochong. Kill them all. Don't leave a single one alive. The many human cultivators on the ground all revealed looks of shock. Some human cultivators struggled to get up, wanting to escape. However, after being attacked by Great-Granduncle Soundwave, they had already suffered very serious internal injuries. Their bodies weren't listening to them at all. Little brother, don't worry about us. Leave on your own. As long as you're alive, there's hope. With your abilities, you'll definitely become a fierce general of the Federation's resistance against the Hades in the future. Fang Yuliang struggled to stand, clutching his chest as if he was facing death calmly. Although Li Daochong had displayed astonishing strength, Fang Yuliang was an old Yuanying cultivator in the Federation. He had already formed the Yuanying 100 years ago. In the past 100 years, Fang Yuliang had been on the front lines of the resistance against the Hades. He had participated in countless battles, big and small, and had also seen many powerful figures. Whether it was the Federation, the Rakshasa state, or the 3 great cultivation empires. Sometimes, when the Federation was under too much pressure, they would ask for help from the 3 great cultivation empires. The three great cultivation empires had never refused to help. It wasn't that the three great cultivation empires were enthusiastic. It was because the Shenghua Federation was the northernmost country in the entire spiritual realm and had the longest border with the Hades. It could be said that the Shenghua Federation was the front line of the spiritual realm's resistance against the Hades. The three great cultivation empires were behind the Federation. If the Shenghua Federation was defeated, the three great cultivation empires would have to face the Hades directly. Then, their lives wouldn't be as good as they were now. Therefore, whether the Shenghua Federation had offended the three great cultivation empires or not, once the war became critical, the three great cultivation empires would have to support them wholeheartedly even if they were unwilling. They would even send out powerful figures above the soul formation stage to help. Fang Yuliang had seen too many terrifying existences. Therefore, even if Li Daocheng could kill a Wu ghost at the level of great-granduncle, it was still far from being able to fight against a true powerhouse. There were more than 1,000 Wu ghosts at the level of great-granduncle on the 13th Spectre, let alone the Rakshasa state. Of course, Li Daocheng was able to display such astonishing combat strength at such a young age. His level of monstrous talent had already reached an extremely shocking level. Fang Yuliang knew that he wouldn't be able to take one blow from Li Daocheng. This young man who had appeared out of nowhere had combat strength comparable to that of a peak great cultivator like Yuanying. He was only at the Jin Dan stage. What was he if not a monstrous talent? In the past 100 years, Fang Yuliang had encountered thousands of young elites. There were no more than 3 people in the Federation who could compete with this young man. Only the 3 great cultivation empires had people who could surpass him. It was the Federation's fortune and the human race's fortune to have such a person. However, the place where he appeared out of nowhere was too dangerous. Fang Yuliang couldn't understand why such a talent was sent to the 13th Spectre. Even if the Federation's front line was breached by the Rakshasa state, they couldn't send such a genius to the front line. This was because he hadn't really grown yet. He should stay in the Central Star Zone and be nurtured by the Soul Formation Grand Cultivators so that he could grow at the fastest speed. Once he caught the attention of the higher-ups of the Rakshasa state, he would become the first target to be killed. Fang Yuliang wasn't worried about the Dark Ghost army in front of him. Even a dark ghost like great-granduncle couldn't take one blow from this young man, let alone a motley crew. Numbers were useless. Just like how a single sound wave from the great-granduncle could cause several hundred cultivators to collapse, this young man could kill these nether ghosts as easily as blowing off dust. However, Fang Yuliang suddenly felt that something was wrong. The battle experience he had accumulated over 100 years made him feel uneasy. He didn't sense any danger, but the corners of his eyes kept twitching and his palms were cold. Great-granduncle's sigh before his death made Fang Yuliang feel that something was wrong. It seemed that great-granduncle just died unwillingly, but it could also be a message before his death. If that was the case, then it would be really troublesome. It was very likely that a certain Grand Wizard of the Rakshasa state was on his way. The strength of a dark ghost was equivalent to that of a human cultivator like the Yuanying cultivators. The Grand Wizard Ghost was on another level. Even the weakest Grand Wizard had the strength of a pseudo-soul formation cultivator, and the Grand Wizard Ghost King had the strength of a late-stage soul formation cultivator. Above the Grand Wizard Ghost King, there was Ancestor Sorcerer Xing Palyuo of the Rakshasa state, and Wu Ho Cherry Blossom Gauze, who was rumored to have returned not long ago. The real reason why Fang Yuliang asked Li Daocheng to leave quickly was not because of the hungry Dark Ghost army. Fang Yuliang and Granny Fenghua were enough to deal with this small number. What Fang Yuliang was really worried about was the inexplicable fear he felt. Li Daocheng glanced at Fang Yuliang. This senior cultivator whom he had never met before was quite pleasing to the eye. Then, Li Daocheng looked towards a certain direction in the void. The corners of his lips raised into a clear arc. As for the Dark Ghost army charging towards them, he did not care at all. Li Daocheng suddenly opened his mouth and said in a flat tone, "You also sensed it?" These words came out of nowhere. Fong Yuliang was stunned for a moment and did not understand. Little brother, what did you sense? Li Daochong strangely turned his face to look at Fong Yuliang again. You didn't sense it? Then why did you ask me to leave? Fong Yuliang's expression was stunned. In just 1 or 2 seconds, he sucked in a breath of cold air and said anxiously, Little brother, did you sense a terrifying death aura coming from afar? Li Daochong nodded and said, I sense the death aura, but it's not terrifying. At this moment, Fong Yuliang's body shook. He finally sensed it. Li Daochong's words were still floating in his ears, but it was completely different for what he sensed. Not terrifying? They were still 200 kilometers away, but the death aura had already enveloped them. How was it not terrifying? How strong was it to be terrifying? Fong Yuliang did not dare to probe too deeply into the death aura. He immediately retracted it after touching it a little, afraid of being entangled by the Grand Wizard's death aura. Little brother, don't try to be brave. Granny Fenghua and I will cover the rear. Hurry up and run. While Li Daochong and Fong Yuliang were talking, the Dark Ghost Army had already charged over. However, the human cultivators who could still fight spontaneously went to meet them. Su Wanqing and Granny Fenghua rushed to the front. At this moment, the witch ghost girl's previous anger had already disappeared. It was replaced by a demonic smile on her pale little face. Kid, you shouldn't have come to 13, Spectre. Hee-pa. Li Daochong swung his hand and slapped her. The witch ghost girl was slapped by a huge force and smashed into the scorched earth. She slid for dozens of meters before stopping. Half of her face was badly mutilated. You are now my servant. If I don't let you laugh, you can't laugh. Do you understand? Li Daochong looked indifferently at the witch ghost girl who was crawling up from the ground. All right, your laughter is really unpleasant, Li Daochong said. The witch ghost girl was so angry that she almost exploded. Fong Yuliang looked at Li Daochong, dumbfounded. The latter bent his knees slightly and stomped on the ground. Boom! The scorched earth exploded under the huge force. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.